Good evening, everyone. First of all, bear with me. This is my first time chairing a meeting, so it's going to be a wild ride, but I really appreciate everyone coming with patience and good spirits, and I know we're going to do some good work tonight, so thank you so much. So first, I will call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum, so we are able to proceed, and so I now call the meeting to order. And we are going to move now to item number 2, which is the land acknowledgement.
The land upon which we work, live, and sustain ourselves is the ancestral and treaty lands of the Michizagig Anishinaabe, also known today as the Mississaugas of the Credit, the rightful caretakers and title holders of this land. We also recognize the rich pre-contact history and relationships which include the Anishinaabe and the Ongwe homeways.
Since European contact, this land continues to be home to Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. As responsible community members, we value the diversity, dignity, and worth of all people.
Colonialism displaced and dispossessed Indigenous peoples of their ancestral land
and continues to deny their basic human rights, dignities, and freedoms.
We are committed to learning true history to reconcile, make reparations, and fulfill our treaty obligations to the original peoples and our collective responsibilities to the land, water, animals, and each other for future generations.
Great, thank you. We will now move to item number 3. We have had a delegation added to tonight, so I'm going to ask that we approve the agenda as amended by adding a delegation from Eco Caledon presented by Ready to Groot and relating to item 7.1. Trustee B. McDonald, could I get you to put that on the floor? No, oh, you're not on this committee.
So it's
Trustee House?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, and as a seconder, who do I have this?
Kathy and Stan.
Jeff Clark. Okay, Trustee Clark?
No, Stan or Kathy.
Who's online? Okay.
Stan.
Okay.
I second it, Jill.
Okay, thank you, Trustee McDonald. Thank you. Okay. All in favor? Or any questions or comments before we move forward? No. Okay. All in favor? I can't see if people are raising their hands. Yeah. Okay, Terry. All right. Okay, so we'll move on to item number 4. Any declarations of conflict or interest? Okay, seeing none, we will move forward. And now we're going to move on to item number 5. Okay, so this is the meetings of the, the minutes of the meeting dated March 8th, 2023. Okay, so I'm going to ask, who do I have? Trustee K. McDonald? If you could please put that on the floor.
I will.
Okay, thank you. And Trustee Alves, would you mind seconding the motion? Okay, great. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Okay, and carried. Great. Okay, now we are going to move to onto our delegation now. So thank you so much to Betty. Oh, sorry, Paul. Yes, sorry. Before we move on to our delegation, first of all, Associate Director De Silva just has a brief comment, so we're going to give him a moment and Silva.
Great. Thank you, Chair Kamoli, and pleasure to be here this evening. Considering the topic for today, I would like to take a moment to emphasize the importance of maintaining a respectful and professional environment during tonight's discussion. We want to remind everyone that there are policies and guidelines in place regarding communication, discussion, and learning at PDSB. Recently, there have been some inappropriate and concerning social media communications about specific staff and people involved with this Library Commons work. We urge everyone to review the existing social media policy, trustee code of conduct, school codes of conduct, procedure bylaws, health and safety legislation, policy and procedures, and professional responsibilities that govern communication, learning, discussion, and debate. Social media is a tool used for advocacy and system transformation that may advance equity and social justice. Social media is a tool that can shape public opinion. However, the use of social media must be done safely, responsibly, and professionally. Social media conduct should maintain the cultivation of a healthy, safe, inclusive, and discrimination-free environment. Communication should always remain professional when engaging online. The procedure bylaws govern the proceedings of this committee meeting. All participants have the right to efficient, effective, and professional meetings and to be treated with respect and courtesy. Offensive language or negative personal references regarding any individual may be ruled out of order by the presiding officer. We're looking forward to hearing everyone's information and perspectives and engaging in a respectful discussion. And I want to thank you, Chair Kamoli, for allowing us to address this matter before starting the discussion tonight. And if you have any further concerns, please let me know and we'll be happy to address them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Associate Director De Silva. Okay, and so we will move now on to item number 6, our delegation. And so we do have, we have received a request, as I said, from Betty DeGroot, who is here from Eco Caledon. Mr. Groot? Okay, wonderful. So you have 10 minutes. I do want to mention before we go ahead that after Mr. Groot presents her delegation, we have the option to ask clarifying questions, but that's not an opportunity for debate or for questions to go back to staff. So we can ask our delegate if they do have anything further that we need to understand. So go right ahead. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to clarify, it's not just myself, it's also John McCrae.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, hi guys.
Yeah. So we're both from Eco Caledon.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, so you'll have 10 minutes total, and we'll give you a 1-minute heads up when we're towards the end.
Okay, super. So we'll start off, thanks for having us here tonight. First of all, thanks to the chair and trustees and director, associate director, and others, staff here, et cetera. My name is John McCrae. This is Betty DeGroot from Eco Caledon. It's an organization in Caledon that really fundamentally promotes sustainability. So all kinds of programs, a lot of them tying with education, and it's a volunteer organization. So we're here because we heard about the situation in terms of the library, and we were concerned about the books because the culling or sorting of books, if we can use that term, is quite extensive. So we wanted to talk a little bit about it, and especially from an environmental point of view. So we wanted the process to kind of slow down a little bit because we feel that it's going too quickly, and it could be you could miss out on some opportunities for kids, especially. So we'd like to also see that whatever books are taken are sustainable, so books don't end up in landfills. That's kind of where we're at. But we're glad to be here to talk more about it. So we're going to talk a little bit about issues. Any of you want to jump in?
Yeah.
Issues.
So I understand the base reason for setting this up, and I was looking at forget the name of it, but the document that sort of outlines what criteria you're using for making this weeding happen. And a lot of it seems reasonable. You know, it seems like a library would want to have a nice collection. And I've seen the word mustie, so MUSTIE. With looking at the acronym, yeah, with those with the letters, I kind of have thoughts about certain letters more than others. But the M, the misleading, definitely I understand you'd like to take misleading books out of your library, that nobody wants to have people come in and then come out with wrong ideas or untrue ideas. And the ugly as well. I don't think anybody wants to hold a book that's musty or moldy. But what we've heard about this weeding process is that in this whole document, I didn't see anywhere where it says how to get rid of the books, like what that ultimately means. And what we've heard from teachers that are experiencing this firsthand, they are the ones actually going through the books. They're upset because everything's been directed by their superiors to go into landfill. And they've been told, please have your collections that you've weeded out, put them in on garbage day. So it's not on recycling day, it's on garbage day. And that's been very specifically told to them. So again, I didn't see anything about how things get sorted, how things get dealt with once they've been weeded out in the document. So somewhere else there's a directive, I guess, about what is eventually happening to these books. So we at Eco Caledon said that that's not a sustainable or good outcome for all this paper. Like books are made out of paper. So we've done a bit of exploring. We've heard what it would take to recycle these books. Hardcovers, apparently the covers need to be removed and then the paper within can be recycled. And that's a process and that takes time. And one of the things we realized with this directive is that it was introduced late March, I believe, or even April, and you want the whole thing done by June 2023. That's really fast. And we're hearing numbers, you know, from a school of 10,000 books, 5,000 of the books are being pulled. Like that's half the collection. And it sounds like if you have to do that kind of reading out in such a short, like in 2 months or even less than 2 months, because the school year ends a few days before that, before the end of June, can you be thoughtful about it? And can you follow this MUSTIE as carefully as you should? And I also realize there's a 3-part process. There's part 1, part 2, and part 3. But part 1 is what they're going through right now. And this is already when they've pulled 5,000 books out of a 10,000 book collection, or up to 25,000 books in larger schools. And that's just huge. And now, you know, here we are imagining that these are going to fill truckloads, right? This is going to fill your garbage truck and another garbage truck and another garbage truck to get them into landfill. And, you know, landfill is not our first choice. I've looked at the Peel Board's policy 74, and it says very clearly that recycling and resource management is a priority. So where is landfill a priority? You know, that was not written in that environmental statement.
And then with a little extra time, you could identify books that you might want to keep. But if you're rushing by June, there's no way it's going to work. That's just not realistic. Think about it. It's going to be an end of the year project that just, it's too late, you know? Or maybe you could repurpose them and give them to some kids for reading, or there are various other creative things that could be done with some of these books rather than see them just even get recycled.
Yeah.
Right?
So yeah, I think we're all happy to see racist books being pulled off the shelves and offensive books being pulled out and homophobic books, anything that doesn't represent our community, you know. But on the other hand, what's happening to those books? Do they have to be landfilled? Can they be recycled? Yes, they should be. In fact, that's actually going to put them further from reach. I'll give you the anecdote of the Science Center in Toronto. If you go to the Science Center, they have a whole section on waste, and they'll show you what they pulled out of a landfill from 40 years ago, and you can still read the newspapers. So is this actually, you know, putting these books out of sight, out of mind by landfilling them? Some scientists later on is going to say, what's in this hole, you know? and that's just, I think, nonsense. You know, if you really don't value these books, if you really find them offensive, yes, let's shred them, because shredded paper can be composted, right? And what a great resource is that. Everybody needs good compost. So I'm just thinking there's so many better options than landfilling. And then of the books that are nearly old, you know, merely out of date, 2008, this book is mine, and I just love this book. And I've read it to children. I've been a teacher for over 30 years. And I read it to any group that I get in front of me. I mostly teach younger kids. But it's from, I think, 1987. So, you know, this book would not fit the criteria of your collection. You know, it would be weeded out. And yet it's got such a beautiful story about self-acceptance and treasuring who you are and realizing that you're not a butterfly, but you're a cricket and you make gorgeous music. You know, it's something like that wouldn't fit your criteria. And I just figure, and then you have the letters T and I, trivial and, sorry, is it insignificant? Is the I? Irrelevant, yeah. And I just think when I'm a child, the things that I love and treasure may be completely trivial to an adult, you know? So if here I am, an adult, a librarian, having to decide, oh, this looks silly, this looks silly, this looks trivial, right? But the child is like, that's my favorite book. And you know, we as adults can't always judge what a child is going to treasure and what, you know, through another person's eyes. So I just think that the net that you've thrown to collect books and you take them out of the library, it just seems very, very wide. And to be thoughtful about it, you need more time, you know, and you need to get more input. And I just heard about this, you know, less than a week ago. And, you know, if I was put under that pressure to go through a collection and I was told, have it out of garbage day, and there was a lot of pressure on me to do this, from up above, and this is my job, you know, I don't think I could do it well. And I've also heard that some of the work of going through these collections is being dispersed to other staff. I don't know, did everyone get the anti-racist training, you know, to actually go through a collection of books and do it properly? Does everyone feel that this is a good use of their time, and will they put enough care and concern into it? So, you know, if it's not just the librarian going through the collection, if other teachers are involved, again, what, you know, are they pulling too many things off the shelves? And we're, like you mentioned, this is a loss for reading.
Well,
you know?
it is, yeah.
Yeah, so just children are learning how to read. They don't have to read, you know, the best high quality everything. If you go through the reading levels and you're trying to assess their reading, I would say half of that is trivial. You know, if I had to, oh, this is silly topic, I would take all those books out. But the kids still need to learn to read, and they need books that are at their level. So, you know, even if it's only about Pat and Kathy and a ball, you know, I mean, that's ancient. But the whole point is, they need to have words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, they could take the books home too once the library doesn't want to keep as well and use them for their family to read as well. I mean, there's lots of creative solutions here. And I know probably a lot of the most offensive books have been identified too. So if someone's concerned that we need to get them out quickly to sort of solve that part of the problem, which is the main problem, that's important. But is there a way to not end up wholesale throwing this away, and maybe do it over time? Maybe even do it just part of the collection, 10% at a time, 1 month, and rather than 100%. That's crazy. 10,000 books for a tiny school, 25 for a large school.
Yeah. Just regarding the money lost, I just think, you know, used book sales are great to bring a little bit of money back into a school. And why not donate some of these books to OCAD or some other art school, and they can make a beautiful art installation out of books that would have ended up in a landfill. So I just think, you know, and as a taxpayer, I had to pay for those books.
That's fine.
So,
Great.
thank you.
So thank you so much for bringing this delegation tonight, both John McCray and Betty Guzman. We really appreciate hearing from both of you. A reminder that we do have the opportunity now, trustees, to ask questions to clarify. But again, this is not a time for a debate. So at this point, I'd like to ask, are there any trustees who would like to ask any clarifying questions of our delegates?
No, but I will give a comment.
No.
Can you give a comment?
No.
Okay.
No comment.
Okay.
Question when it's my turn, please.
Yeah, Trustee K. McDonald, that would be great. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. For the I can't remember the name of the lady who was speaking, but in the delegation, she suggested that, or is she suggesting, I just wanted clarity, that we should have like a numerical quota of books that should be removed?
It wasn't a quota, it just happened to be that number of books fit in this criteria of MUSTIE. You know, that many books were collected looking at the criteria. So there was no quota. It was just that many books, because of this criteria, ended up being pulled out of the collection.
Okay, because I know, for example, when I was a parent, I'm just trying to understand something, because when I was a parent chair of the school council at Agnes Taylor, when we had gone through a similar culling of books, called it at the time, and we ended up with about 1/8 of our collection remaining. But we had books, for example, that had Pierre Elliott Trudeau as the Prime Minister, Father Trudeau. So I understand, yes, you want kids to have resources to read, but if they're reading information that's outdated, like as your current Prime Minister is, Trudeau, or
okay, Trustee McDonald, I do appreciate hearing this, but I think this goes outside of the clarifying question, and so I would ask, do you have any other clarifying questions for the delegate?
No, but I just wanted to know, like, if it was the quota, the numbers. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Trustee McDonald. We will, of course, have a chance for further discussion after we've been through the reports from staff. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And are there any further questions, clarifying questions from trustees? No. Okay, seeing none. Then thank you so much to both of you for coming to. Oh, yes.
The trustees now have an opportunity to do one of four things, and a motion is required for one of those four things. Either one, receive the presentation for information. Two, refer the presentation to another committee for action or information. Or three, refer the presentation to the Director of Education for follow-up with a delegation by assigned staff. Or four, request an information report from staff be presented at a subsequent meeting. As there is a report already on the agenda and an opportunity to debate, it may be appropriate to receive the presentation for information at this time, but that's up for a motion to be brought forward from one of the members of the committee.
Okay. Do I have any trustees who would like to put a motion regarding one of those four options? Are you able to?
Yeah, city committee member.
Oh my gosh, yes, you are. Sorry.
Through you, Chair. I'd like to opt for option number 3 to send this to our director server for response. I think there's some good questions there. And while I can, thank you for coming. We need a second.
Do I have a second there?
Someone online stand.
Sorry, I will second that.
Okay, great. Okay, and so all in favor? Okay, carried. Great. Okay, thank you so much. So we will be referring that back to the director.
Great. Thanks for helping.
Okay. Okay, so now we're going to move on to item 7. So we have reports from officials and staff. We do have 2 reports coming tonight. So we are going to start with 7.1. And as we said, okay, so 7.1, the curation cycle for school library learning commons collections. This is a report for information. It will be an oral presentation by Bernadette Smith. What I would ask is that we, after we hearing this report, that we make time for questions first and any discussion. If there are going to be motions coming, first let's get through the debate so we have the chance to better understand and be clear on what we're learning about tonight. So, so thank you so much, and I'm turning it over to Bernadette Smith.
Thank you so much, and good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chair Camoli, and good evening to everyone here in the Peel District School Board. My name is Bernadette Smith, and I am the Superintendent of Innovation and Research, and I am here with the Coordinating Principal of Library Support Services, Stephen Keelyside. As well online, we have our Coordinator of Library Support Services, Kathleen Appleton. We will be providing you with an overview of the 3-step curation cycle for school library learning commons. Next slide, please. We will highlight the key points of the cycle, including the redefined purpose of the PDSB Library Learning Commons collections, the 3 steps of the curation process, the roles and responsibilities of all stakeholders, and the critical path for implementing Directive 18. Next slide. Public libraries aim to provide access to a wide range of resources for all members of the community, regardless of age or educational level. They strive to be holders of all good books that have ever existed, with uniform collections where quantity is valued. Contrary to this, PDSB Library Learning Commons collections aim to support student success with a specific purpose of supporting the curriculum and academic goals of the school. By understanding the unique purpose of our collections, we can ask critical questions about the collections that are curated for our students. Are they inclusive, current, and engaging to students? Do they align with board priorities and promote student agency and ownership? Do they support the current curriculum and academic goals of the school? When students can see themselves reflected in the books they read and relate to the characters and stories, they're more likely to develop a love for reading and learning. In our pilot schools, we have found that circulation in weeded schools went up 2 to 3 times previous circulation data, despite having fewer books on the shelves. This is because students are given choice and voice in selecting their school collections, making it more accessible for them to find the books they are looking for, and fostering a culture of reading and exploration. Understanding the differences between a public library collection and a Peel District School Board Library Learning Commons collection is crucial in ensuring that students are centered in our efforts and that they have access to high quality, relevant, and inclusive resources that support their academic goals. Next slide, please. Our work in this area is not just about meeting the Directive 18. It is also about fulfilling our responsibilities under PDSB policies 48, Safe and Caring Schools, and policy 51, Human Rights. These policies reflect our commitment to creating and maintaining a safe, inclusive, and respectful learning and working environment that is free of discrimination and harassment. By aligning our work with the Together We're Better 2.0 Black Student Success Strategy, Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action, Right to Read report, which states the failure of the school boards to provide the students with current books that are appropriate for their level of reading, relevant to their experiences and identities, and reflective of the diversity of Ontario, undermines students' ability to meet their full potential. And the Empowering Modern Learners vision document. We work to create library learning commons in PDSB that are engaging, exciting, accurate, current, inclusive, and identity affirming. The purpose of this work is to support the curriculum and academic goals of the school, using resources that are appropriate, relevant, and responsive to the age and developmental levels of our students. In order to make sure that our books and reading materials are relevant, accurate, and aligned with the Ontario curriculum, the current Ontario curriculum, that has been and continues to be updated to reflect current needs and times, the Peel District School Board, like every other school in Canada, reads our collections as informed by guidelines from the Canadian School Libraries Association. The 2008 publication date is not definitive. If books older than 2008 meet the criteria of being factually accurate, serve the current curriculum, align with school board initiatives, and are responsive and culturally relevant to the student interest and engagement, then they should stay on the shelves. In the case of damaged books, we must take action to ensure that our students have access to accurate and quality resources. Therefore, we may choose to repurchase newer copies or replace damaged ones. Books that are in poor condition, for example, cause health concerns with mold, contain inaccurate information, do not align with the Ontario curriculum, or cause harm to school communities, will be removed from our collection. These resources cannot be relocated. With reference to fiction, fiction books are considered media. Like other forms of media, such as television, film, and digital content, fiction books shape and reflect cultural norms and societal values. They often provide insights into the time and context in which they were written, mirroring the attitudes, beliefs, for example, the way women were talked about, and language prevalent in that era, for example, the R word to refer to learner variability. Schools are asked to responsibly follow Peel Region's recycling guidelines when disposing of any resources. Custodial staff work in collaboration with schools to dispose of these resources responsibly. Next slide, please. This 3-step curation cycle provides a framework for ensuring that our collections are curated to align with the board priorities and to be inclusive, anti-racist, and identity affirming. Curating responsive, student-centered school collections can be to curating a unique playlist on Spotify based on the user's tastes and needs. It's the difference between having every single song available to you and having a curated playlist that speaks to your interests, needs, and preferences. Similarly, keeping every book available on school shelves versus curating a collection that is relevant to what students are learning, what they want to know more about, that reflect and relate to them, and that give them voice and choice in their school's collections, we can have a significant impact on student engagement and excitement about reading. Like in a music playlist, there is room for older books in a student-centered curated collection. The composition of the collection is not static. Ongoing curation involves adding and deleting items as tastes and needs change and responding to those changes. Teacher librarians and other educators do not curate this playlist. It is driven by the need to reinforce the most current and updated curriculum, align with board priorities, and reflect student interests. This three-step curation cycle we are implementing contains new guidelines and procedures. While step one is an update of a pre-existing step, weeding of library learning collections, the other two steps are entirely new. This cycle ensures that we uphold the standards of quality, inclusiveness, and representation set by the Peel District School Board and held accountable for every resource in the collection. We must be intentional in our selection and weeding processes, ensuring that every resource is in the collection for a reason and justifying its inclusion. It's important to remember that nothing is neutral, and we must evaluate every text and resource with intentionality. When we navigate through step 2 and 3, through multiple perspectives, through anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and inclusive strategies. Next slide, please.
In step 1 of the three-step curation cycle, the teacher librarian is responsible for an equity-informed reading of the entire collection, including fiction and nonfiction. However, this process cannot be successfully completed without the support of the administration and custodial staff. The criteria used for reading will vary depending on the section. For nonfiction, the condition of age and accuracy and relevance of the facts in the resource are considered. For fiction, circulation data is also taken into account. Older books, such as Diary of a Wimpy Kid, The Hobbit, or recently, The Great Gatsby, are being kept on shelves because the student circulation data supports it, but a newer version may need to be purchased if the book is in poor condition. Additionally, books that support events or celebrations like In Flanders Fields for Remembrance Day may need to be kept, even if newer versions are not available. The definition of quality during this step is based on the condition, age, accuracy, and relevance of the facts in the resource. Next slide, please. MUSTY is an acronym that can be used to help guide reading and curation. It includes considerations of content and condition. This acronym is used in conjunction with date only for nonfiction and with the circulation data for fiction when reading. M, misleading. This includes things like cultural appropriation and mistruths. Indigenous symbols for Canada and its truths about enslavement are examples that we have shared during training. U for unpleasant. These examples include wet, moldy, or crunched books, books that are consumable and need to be replaced. Books that may be superseded because of new curriculums, de-streaming or Black Studies, Indigenous Studies, and new courses that are available within the Peel District School Board. Books that are trivial, that may, for example, share that computer technology references floppy disks, or geography and stats that are old and no longer relevant to current studies. Similarly, irrelevant includes no longer relevant content, for example, outdated pop culture. Lastly, E represents elsewhere. We are not a public library. We serve a different purpose. We are not the holder of all good books. We need to offer the most current, relevant, and accurate information. Our students deserve the best for the short years that we have them. Even if we don't have these books in our Library Learning Commons collections, these books will still exist in other spaces. Next slide, please. A school collection may represent its learning community. but still not be anti-racist, inclusive, and anti-colonial. On the other hand, a collection may focus on these aspects but not fully represent its learning community. It's essential to prioritize both representation and anti-racist, inclusive, and anti-colonial work to ensure that the collection is truly reflective of and responsive to the community it serves. This requires ongoing creation, critical evaluation, and a willingness to continually learn and adapt to meet the needs of all learners. We are not creating a banned book list. We are creating responsive, curated collections that focus on current curriculum, student interest, board initiatives. So we need to remain focused and aligned with these. Our uniform criteria matrix will ensure that there's a uniform output. In step 2, the anti-racist and inclusive audit, quality will be defined by resources that promote anti-racism, cultural responsiveness, and inclusivity. This task does not rest solely on the teacher librarian's shoulders. Rather, it is a collaborative effort that requires the participation of every educator within that school community. The School Advisory Council, made up of school staff members. This audit empowers schools to address goals from their from their school improvement for equity plan. It is essential that representation from various school departments and school administration are responsible for conducting this part of the audit. It is essential that the audit be conducted in this manner because not every teacher librarian will have the critical consciousness and perspective needed to audit a collection of thousands of resources. Additionally, even individuals with diverse lived experiences should not have the sole agency to make decisions about which resources stay in the collection and which do not. Doing this work in community ensures that the best, most informed, bias-free decision is being made about each resource. The School Advisory Council will use guiding questions for the anti-racist and inclusion audit tool as they analyze their Library Learning Commons resources. Some of the guiding questions include, but are not limited to, does this resource contain stereotypes or microaggressions against certain identities in its text, words, or illustrations? Is this resource potentially triggering and marginalizing for certain students due to its topic or description of trauma? Does this resource affirm and empower students exploring their identities? It's critical to remember that we cannot layer shiny new inclusive resources alongside racist, oppressive, and colonial resources. Next slide. The third and final step in the curation cycle is the representation audit. This step involves breaking down the remaining collection to identify voices, identities, and perspectives that are overrepresented, underrepresented, and those that are missing. It is essential that resources not only accurately reflect the diverse students and communities served by the board, but also actively affirm the diverse identities of historically marginalized groups, including Black, Indigenous, 2S LGBTQ+, Muslim, Latinx, Jewish, and South Asian identities. This step is crucial because it ensures that the collection is reflective of students and the board's broader school communities while intentionally affirming students' identities that continue to be sparsely represented in our current collections. The data collected from this audit will help guide future purchases and ensure that the board's collections are inclusive and representative. School community members, such as the Black Student Association, parent groups, and student surveys, could get involved and suggest titles that they would like to include in their school's story.
Next slide, please. So while ongoing reading of text has always been an expectation of the teacher librarian's role, it was not previously regulated or documented. Time not consistently allocated, nor did we have the type of robust training that we have implemented and continue to implement. With the new creation cycle, accountability measures have been established for ongoing reading to prioritize the responsibility of the teacher librarian's role, along with ongoing audits of text for anti-racist and inclusive content. It's important to note that the old guidelines had a reading date of 10 years, but the new guidelines extend the shelf life of the collection by 5 years through ongoing reading and auditing processes. No one is to be blamed for the current state of the collections. However, moving forward, it becomes our collective responsibility to be accountable for what remains on the shelves. Indeed, this year has been unusual for the Peel District School Board, as we didn't anticipate the large amount of books that required weeding out of the school library learning commons. This was due to the need to catch up and reset our collections after neglecting this weeding process for an extended period of time. We have taken measures to prevent a recurrence of this issue on such a large scale in the future. Replenishing our texts will provide the chance to renew and refresh our library learning commons collections. Not only are we cleaning up, we are fully implementing Ministry Directive 18 by making systemic changes to ensure our collections are never in this state again. As Maya Angelou reminds us, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. Next slide, please. While we understand the environmental concerns associated with disposing of large number of books, it's crucial to prioritize the quality of our collections and adhere to responsible recycling guidelines provided by Peel Region. This ensures that we are taking an environmentally conscious approach while maintaining collections that foster a positive and inclusive learning environment for our students. Upon learning about discrepancies in disposal practices across Peel schools, we took prompt action to investigate and improve our methods moving forward. We initiated discussions with our internal facilities and environment department, as well as external agencies specializing in shredding and recycling services, to explore and implement best practices for disposing of weeded materials. This has also triggered the need for us to review the vendors that we work with as Library Support Services team to ensure that they offer sustainable and environmentally friendly materials that are recyclable. As a result of these collaborative efforts, we are working closely with the PDSB Facilities Environment Support Department to ensure that responsible recycling practices are consistently followed throughout the school system for this ongoing initiative. And this is being addressed at every training. Teacher librarians will receive continued guidance to adhere to the recycling guidelines provided by the Region of Peel, collaborating with their school's custodial staff to determine the most environmentally friendly methods for disposing of books. Our collective commitment to sustainable practices will help create a more eco-conscious and responsible school environment while maintaining high quality library collections for our students. Next slide, please. Superintendents can look for specific evidence during their accountability visits to ensure that implementation process is taking place as intended. We follow guidelines from the Canadian School Libraries Association, ensuring that our actions are in line with best practices across the country. Although the 2008 publication date is not definitive, it acts as a starting point to ensure that we carefully evaluate books to ensure that they are factually accurate, serve the current curriculum, and remain culturally relevant to our students. If there are books with older publication dates, the teacher librarian should be able to explain why they remained and how they support the current version of the Ontario curriculum, align with PDSB board initiatives, and or have the circulation data that shows that resource is still relevant to students. Step 1 must be completed by June 30th, 2023, which is weeding. Step 2, superintendent should look for the same indicators as in step 1, but with the added expectation that once this phase is completed, the resources left in the collection should be high quality resources that promote inclusivity and critical consciousness. In step 3, which is the representation audit, superintendent should again look for the same indicators as in steps 1 and 2. And by the end of this process, the teacher librarian and administrators should have a good idea of the representation gap in their collection and will be able to curate an inclusive replenishment plan that reflects their school community's rich and diverse identities, as well as the wider PDSB community. Next slide, please.
During the implementation process, it is important to ensure accountability for the curation cycle. Teacher librarians were trained in their families of schools with a common slide deck scripted presentation, and resources to ensure consistent messaging and to promote collaboration among the teacher librarian professional network. An annual curation cycle planning document must be completed and submitted to both the school administrators and library support services. The results of the representation audit will be shared with members of the school community, and the community will be encouraged to contribute purchasing recommendations for the replenishment of the collection. This promotes a sense of ownership and collaboration within the school community and ensures that the collection remains relevant and reflective of the diverse needs of the students. Next slide. The critical path for this implementation is essential to ensure that the process runs smoothly and efficiently. Training by families of schools started after March 20th, 2023, and will end on May 16th, 2023. The training was piloted within a family of schools in January 2023. Step 1, which is the weeding process, must be completed by June 30th, 2023. Step 2, which is the equity audit of nonfiction, should be completed by December 2023. And step 3, which is the equity audit and representation audit of fiction, respectively, should be completed by June 2024. Next slide, please.
To support the intentional replenishment of library learning commons collections, we are accessing targeted student support funds stemming from ministry education funding towards. Allocations will be sent to the schools at the beginning of the 2023-2024 school year. Allocations will total $2.4 million. These allocated funds will be dedicated to the purchasing of books that support the current provincial curriculum and work priorities, are accurate, and do not cause harm. We have recommended that for the next 5 years, schools allocate $12 per student to augment these funds. Finally, we have advised teacher librarians to be intentional with their purchases so that they can curate a collection that purposely supports curriculum, board priorities, and student and community interests. Replenishment of collections needs to be a holistic effort and will require 3 levels of accountability to ensure board level replenishment funds, schools or principal budgets are required to direct budget to renew learning library commons collections, as a teacher librarian as well share and curate with students and families. Intentionally curating collections is vital for promoting student success, socially, emotionally, and academically. Regularly weeding out outdated materials ensures the library reflects the latest advances in society, technology, and culture, exposing students to new ideas and opportunities. A stagnant collection can limit students' exposure to new ideas, hindering academic and personal growth. Diverse collections can broaden horizons and inspire students to pursue new interests and career pathways. Thank you, Chair and trustees, for allowing us to share our work with you tonight. We welcome questions at this time.
Okay, thank you so much for bringing that report to us tonight. So we will get started with questions from trustees. Again, I do ask that if we can, let's go through questions before we have any motions, as I understand there may be some coming tonight. But I'd like to make sure that we have the chance to have a healthy conversation and make sure that everyone has a chance to get whatever clarity they need from this is a pretty big project. So do we have anyone who would like to ask any questions? Trustee.
Put it on the floor first.
Oh, so sorry. Yes. So we're going to put this on the floor. Trustee Ellis. Okay. And second, Trustee Cameron. Thank you.
I will.
All in favor? Yeah. Okay. All right. So now we can move to questions. Now, Trustee Cameron, I see that you have your hand up. Is that to ask a question? Okay, great.
Yes, I have a few questions through you, Chair. So I'll speak from my community, although 2 representatives from Eco-Caledon were here previously with the delegation, certainly stole a number of my points, but perhaps revisiting them would not be a bad thing. The most common question I've had from my constituents has been who thought that putting books in a landfill was a good idea, because that was clearly the initial position taken by administration. That and we know this because the number of people who have librarians included who have spoken about being told in training that they were to put the books they were deciding come off the shelves into a not into a recycle bin, but to a dumpster, and that those books should be put in a dumpster timed for when those dumpsters would be picked up, taken to landfill. So that's a very intentional and orchestrated set of instructions that I understand administration is walking back now, and that's a good part of this. I have had a number of email discussions with a number of administrative senior team members, so I have a better understanding of where they're headed today. What I was a little bit confused about was while we've been told here tonight that schools and librarians and principals will be told to follow the Region Appeal recycling process. That's a good thing, I want to say, but we only heard it in words here. There's a report before us that none of this appears in written form. It is just words around the table tonight, and yet we have a report that I don't see it anywhere in the report outlined what the new redirection of books will be in terms of disposal. I know when I heard about this, I immediately sent information to some senior team members that my community was very upset about where the books were going and had done their own research on $99 a skid for recycling with a company, and also a recycling, the cost of shred the books, what that would be. I did hear back that there were some members of administration who were concerned about the cost of doing that. And I would say only that if anyone is worried about the cost of either recycling or shredding or any other more environmentally careful method of disposal, you ought to also be concerned about the cost of dumping those books into the land. It's 2023, and I wondered, when I heard this, if only anyone had asked students, any of our students, what they thought of that idea. I'm pretty sure you would have heard from our students, where we have a board environmental sustainability officer, where we have schools and students who have been teaching recycle, reduce, reuse, where we have certified eco schools, and where we understand that children see, children do. So my first question through you, Chair, thank you for your patience, is will we see somewhere where it will be written, this commitment to ordering librarians and principals to follow the Region Appeal recycling process?
Thank you for the question, and through you, Chair, I'm going to pass it to Coordinating Principal Stephen Keeneyside to respond.
Thank you. As indicated in the training, resources must be disposed of due to harm, condition, and health concerns like mold. These resources cannot be relocated. Schools are encouraged to dispose of them as responsibly as possible by following Peel Region's recycling guidelines, as indicated in the training. Custodial staff work in collaboration with schools to dispose of these resources responsibly. Dumpsters are used for both recycling and waste disposal and occur generally on the same day. We have connected with our partners in the sustainability staff to determine best practices and promising opportunities moving forward, including shredding through Iron Mountain. We are continuing to explore that option as we move forward. We will be including information with regards to this direction on our Library Support Services website. Thank you.
Trustee Cameron, any follow-up questions?
Yes, thank you. The question, my original question was, will we see in writing this effort to ensure that the principals and librarians will be following the region of Peel recycling? So I understand, because we heard that in the report, where administration is at today, and relooking at the disposal of the books that come off the shelves, but I'm still not hearing the answer as to, will we see in writing this direction? Because right now we have principals and librarians who think that they should be throwing books in the dumpster, and clarity is missing on this one at the grassroots. Through you, Chair. So the question is, will we see this in writing somewhere?
Through you, Chair. Yes, you will. As I said, we will be including that information on our Library Support Services website and communicating that with schools. We are continuing to share the same direction that was shared during training, that schools should be following Peel Region recycling guidelines, and we continue to work with our sustainability partners within the PDSB to explore other promising practices, including shredding.
Thank you. Any follow-ups, Trustee Cameron?
Thank you, and thank you for the answer. I look forward to seeing this somewhere in writing, so that I know that all of our 259 schools of librarians and principals understand that this is a new practice that they should be following. They should be pivoting from the dumpster to a region appeal recycling program. I do have a question about who pays for the replenishment. We heard about $2.4 or $2.5 million that the board would need to, in the first year, to replenish. I want to clarify whether that's intended to come out of this coming budget, because we're in budget cycle right now as trustees, meeting to hear steps around dollars and cents. Is that going to come out of this current budget, or are you suggesting we need to go to the ministry to ask for that money?
Thank you for the question, and through you, Chair. The student support funding will come from the ministry budget that is provided to us, and it will be coming 23-24.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm not sure. I may have missed it. Maybe you said that. I'm sorry if I missed it, but that is a good news portion for the replenishment. Thank you. Just one last thing, Chair. And I really see this issue as in two parts. And I've broken it down in half, or portions of two. And the first part is about the removing of books off the shelves. The second part is about what we do with the books we remove. And I have focused on the second half, right? The second part. That's been, my community has directed me that's an issue for them. So I have focused on that. I just want to add that for the first part, I haven't gone there in terms of argument. Maybe other trustees have a voice for that, but I haven't gone there intentionally, because I would honestly tell you that the people who have called me from my community, there are many who have said about the books being removed off the shelves, it's about time. It's about what was required long ago. And they're pleased that that's happening that way. In some cases, it's librarians. In some cases, it's retired librarians, the people who really do know. So I'm cautious in sort of the tightrope I walk in terms of my questions, but I do appreciate how difficult it is for you to be doing the first part. But I will tell you, no one in my community wants a book that is racist, that is oppressive about other people, that is injurious to another human being on their bookshelves in their schools. Thank you for the answers to all administrators, and thank you, Chair Promoli. Appreciate your.
Thank you so much, Trustee Cameron. Trustee Davies, I saw your hand.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. I noticed a little checklist there. Is that checklist being filled out for every book that's being thrown out? And how are we making sure that the books that's being thrown out in one school isn't being ordered by another school? And I just sort of wanted the logistics behind that, because I didn't see it in the presentation.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Chair, that is a very good question, and it is through the professional judgment of the staff that they are selecting which books need to be removed from shelves and which ones are staying. However, as you heard in the presentation, it is also with support of an advisory committee, as well as students that support with identifying what's appropriate and what's not. That checklist, you're referring to the musty one? Yes, so that is what's used as a guide to select what is appropriate and what's not. So it's a uniformed criteria matrix, and it will ensure a uniformed output. So we have gone through many different trainings already this past year, where it was very intentional through our library support services team, as well as coordinating principal Stephen Keeney's side. And we've done the training with small groups, so it's within family of schools, not one big training at a hall where things can kind of get lost. So by having these intimate trainings, people have had the opportunity to really get into this process, ask the questions, get their answers, and then our staff go and support them as well if they are having some difficulty, because as we've stated, some people will be a lot further along in terms of their understanding or their expertise. And so we also provide staff to ensure that they are moving along that matrix or that checklist, if you will, to identify what's appropriate and what's not. Does that help?
Just to follow, I just sort of wanted some assurances that, this title of book that's being thrown out to Caledon, because we have 259 different people making this decision. How do I know that South Mississauga isn't ordering those same 12 titles that we put in a landfill? As the guys who look after the money, I just wanted to know, are we sharing information? Is there a list? Hey, don't order these. And is that a list of banned books? And I'm just getting a little concerned here.
There is no list of banned books. So we do not have a list of banned books at all. And this is something where we're building the professional capacity of teacher librarians to do so. To your question about a network, yes, absolutely, there is a network that's supportive of one another. When there's questions of whether a book should be removed, they are reaching out to one another as well, including our library support services staff. So that is happening, and the whole point is to have these guides, as well as thinking about those three pieces, right? Before purchasing a book, is it meeting curriculum expectations that the ministry has provided for us? Is it meeting board priorities and student interests and needs? So all of that is also part of the training and supports when making a judgment as to what to purchase and seed as well to create that curation process in your school.
Okay, I just see that 259 people are making 259 different decisions on the same book. And I'm just afraid that 130 of them will say, no, that's no good. And the other 130 go, yeah, that's a great book, let's order some. And I don't see a logical way for you to do this. However, I just want to make sure that, a book that's considered not appropriate is not appropriate throughout the entire board.
And I know that coordinating principal Stephen Keeney-Size wants to add to this as well. So it is every educator's job to ensure that we are engaging in equitable practices through that critical consciousness, that criticality, in terms of how it is that we're choosing our resources for our libraries. And that's the training. That is what the training is. And right now we're just talking about step one, which is weeding. So training will continue to build the capacity of educators. I'll pass it over to you, Stephen.
So, through you, Chair, I believe you're referring to books that are harmful, racist, oppressive, etc. What are the books?
No, I'm referring to, you have 259 individuals at one at each school making this decision. What is that in one person's mind is not that in another person's mind, because we all have different experiences and we've gone through different things. So in that vein, I just want to know, how do you know that someone who doesn't find that book problematic isn't going to order the same book that someone up here finds problematic? I just don't see how we've done that. Do we keep these checklists that are, do we keep track of them on a certain title of book so that we can avoid this, or is any sort of tracking be done?
So through you, Chair. Problematic books are dealt with as probably racist, oppressive, or not representative of our school community. Those books will be identified in steps 2 and 3. They're not part of the must-eat guidelines. The must-see guidelines will be uniquely appreciated by individual book. If I have a book that is damaged, I might be reading that book out because it's damaged, right? That book might stay in another library because it has every right to stay. In fact, it might need to be staying in my library if I just need to repurchase another copy.
Yeah, I just found that, I heard the shocking number that 5,000 out of 10,000 books were thrown out. So of the ones that were, again, deemed offensive, racist, that sort of thing, is there a checklist that was filled out and some sort of list of those titles so that another school doesn't order that same book?
So no, we do not have a banned list. We do not have that type of list that you're referring to. What also I just want to refer to as well is one person alone is not making this decision. So there is a staff, advisory team within the school that will be working together to review the texts and make the decisions, including having input from students in terms of what their interest is in order to provide some input for the types of books that are going to be purchased. Remembering that right now we're at step 1. So when we get to step 2, so there's 3 steps in this creation cycle. When we get to step 2 and we're starting to look at the content more readily in terms of what kind of offense that it possibly could be providing, that is when we get even deeper in terms of the type of learning for the teacher librarians in schools. So that training, to your question, how can every person be making similar decisions? We're hoping that through the training, we are building that professional judgment, we're building the capacity of the educators and their criticality when they're looking at these books and providing them with necessary scaffolds in order to make appropriate decisions.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Chair Davies. I do have a speakers list going, so I did have Trustee McDonald and Trustee Green are both online, and they have their hands up. After that, Trustee Owls. And I will also add Trustee B. McDonald. So I'm going to go now to Trustee K. McDonald online.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I have a couple of questions. But first, I'd like to thank Bernadette and her team for this report. I appreciate you and I appreciate this report, and thank you very much for that. I heard it was mentioned that none of the books are going to be redirected. I just wanted to confirm that practice has stopped. None of the books, like if it's pulled from one classroom, it won't go to another school.
Thank you for that question, and through you, Chair. That is correct. We're not redirecting books that we do not feel are accurate, appropriate, relevant for our students, and then sending them to another school or donating them or sending them across the world for other students to engage with. That is not the practice that we are embracing here. If we deem that they are not appropriate for our schools, then they are going to be disposed of in the most appropriate manner.
Great, thank you for that. I'm happy to hear that. And what process that is in place that will ensure that the weeding occurs like on schedule, so we don't have this backlog?
Another good question. Thank you. Through you, Chair. We do have now, we are keeping an accountability. We have an accountability framework that we have created, and we are keeping track of which schools are completing this process. We're working very closely with them. We have a team of 3 librarians, teacher librarians that are employed centrally. And so they have different schools that they're supporting, and definitely, yes, keeping track and being then accountable to superintendents as they go into schools to ensure that the processes are happening. We have superintendents also telling us that they're starting their visits, their seat visits in the library learning commons, where they too get insight in terms of where they are in the process, what kind of supports they need, and so on.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And another question I have is, as staff changes, so your teacher librarian has now changed, is there a formal process that once you have a new teacher librarian, that to become a teacher librarian, do you have to go to a special training, then you get appointed? Is there some process in place that would take into account when the staff changes?
Thank you for that question, and through you, Chair. Yes, we do have turnover of staff, and that is why also we are keeping very close track of what it is that is happening in the library learning commons of each school, and we ensure transition planning when there are new staff that join the school so that they know where the school is in the process and then picking up from there. And of course, our central staff would be there to support and scaffold that process.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Trustee McDonald. And now I'm going to move to Trustee David Green.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and through you. Now, I just to make a comment before I ask my question. I wish we had this report long time ago because it would have helped to alleviate some of the anxiety that has been in the community, and even around some questions that I personally had to answer last week from several different media. Now, I want to say I appreciate the report because now I have a more clearer and better idea of exactly how and what has been done. I know of the process over my years being a trustee, and this is something that every board go through. But with the understanding about the arm piece that was being moved, I was concerned about how these trainings are being done and who were the expert and determine that piece. And I just wanted to ask, I got two questions. In terms of what would deem inappropriate to be in a school library, did we have student voice as a part of this?
Thank you for your question. Through you, Chair, I'm going to pass this to Stephen Keeney's side.
So we do engage with student voice when it comes to step 3 and the replenishment process for resources that support the representation audit and the data that we've gathered through our representation audit. So what identities are underrepresented, overrepresented, or not represented at all within our library learning collections in each site. We can't ask students to look for harm in resources, as that would be an irresponsible task to ask to engage them in those steps.
Okay. Follow up through here. I do understand that, and you answer my second question is about the replenishing process that you will be having a voice. But I have watched number of media where the students were very vocal about certain things that they have been through and have been going through in various different schools and so forth. So I think this, you guys are the expert telling you what to do, but they are the one that actually has to be in the school, in these safe spaces, and even to maybe a limit degree, we need to hear from them because at the end of the day, they are the one that are using the library. We know we staff are using the library, but the greater impact of those libraries are students. But I thank you for taking the time to bring this report and to answer my question this afternoon. I had more questions, but because of the clarity of the report and how it was presented, I am satisfied. So thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Green. So next on the list, I have Trustee Alves.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair, I have a few questions for the administration. Stan Cameron asked earlier a question that I'm not sure we got an exact response to. So for clarity, can we just understand when we decided to throw the books out, was the landfill the best available option at the time? I understand that we referenced, Region Appeals recycling policy, but would they not have said to recycle those books? And how many of them did we throw in the dump?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. The training has been consistent with a consistent script slide deck, and resources that has been provided to all teacher librarians. That has included references to following Peel Region recycling guidelines since day one. Peel Region recycling guidelines will not allow us to recycle all paper. There are references in Peel Region recycling guidelines to coated paper or laminated paper that cannot be recycled. Those are two examples of paper resources that can't be recycled, which often play out in hardcover books, but not limited to.
Thank you. Do we have a number for how many we recycle?
Schools are just beginning the weeding process, so we would not have that data at this time.
Okay. Earlier in the conversation, we were talking about timelines, and I think about nearing on 6 months ago, I asked Associate Director Paul De Silva about this policy. At the time, it was a pilot. When did we go from pilot to program? And knowing the financial impact that this has had, I'm just wondering why between, I guess, 6 months ago, almost 5 months and change, and now, the board wasn't allotted the opportunity to provide feedback on the progress of the pilot program before it became a process.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Chair. If I'm understanding correctly, so the pilot, we usually start with a pilot when we undergo something very large scale of this sort. And so we received a lot of information from that pilot, including through the administrators, the teacher librarians, and others that were part of the process. And this was something that is a response to Directive 18 as well. And so we do have our timelines in terms of what it is that we needed to ensure we had gotten started and have a critical path in terms of that. And there was a board report as well, I believe. I can't remember the date right now, but it's on our website. And it has all of the dates on there as well. So there we had the full timeline there. So in terms of the pilot school, we received a lot of information, and that helped us to refine the process and then work to full implementation. And so even having the training, as I was saying earlier, with the FOS, with the Family of Schools as a group, allowed us to really get more in-depth with the training. It's scripted training. And yes, all of these pieces were part of the training as well, where staff was asked to follow recycling guidelines and so on, and work through these different processes that we've presented.
Thank you. Thank you for the response. And through your chair, just to clarify, it was actually December when I brought up the first question to Associate Director Paul De Silva about a matrix and a catalog for the same questions that my colleague Will Davies brought up, i.e. if a racist book is in Caledon, a racist book would inherently be racist here in Mississauga Lakeshore. So I'm just trying to get clarity on why we didn't pause to address that concern that trustees brought at the open session in December and move straight to weeding across the region of Peel.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Chair. Yeah, Trustee Alves, I remember the conversation myself in December, and I think we at that particular time said that we would have an offline conversation around those pieces. At that point, I didn't hear or from you or any of the trustees around a pause or cancellation in the pilot necessarily. But certainly did hear some concerns at that time.
Thank you. Through Chair, thank you, Associate Director. I suppose we'll put a pin in that, but I do remember a conversation at that meeting and then another one at curriculum. And I guess my frustration was that we went from what seems like step one right to the implementation without having the board consulted about, the question we raised in open session. We had been waiting for this report, which has now come a little bit later, but I'll put a pin in that and I'll move to a different question. Do we have an account of how many books we've pulled as a board to date from this year?
Thanks for the question, and through you, Chair. No, we do not have a count of all of the books. We're not keeping a list. There is no banned list either, and this is school by school action.
you, Chair. I'm almost at the end of my list, so thanks, Steph, again for bearing with me on all my questions. The MUST acronym makes note to two parts of the acronym caused some concern for me, because I believe that a lot of this, at least in my interpretation, is subjective. It involves a lot of feeling or emotion and personal experience that will vary from person to person, as my colleagues earlier have described. For things like irrelevant, one could argue the book The Cat in the Hat might be relevant. And I'm not sure if that's a book we actually have in the system, or if we don't. And I know that that's a book that historically has been argued for a long time. So two-part question. Is the Peel District School Board tied to that acronym MUST-E by a ministry directive of any kind? Are we obligated to use it? And two, how are we mitigating all of the discrepancies that come with feelings and emotion and subjectivity of the acronym in its implementation?
Thank you. I was just looking for an acronym myself, just to answer that question through you, Chair. We do use that acronym. It stems from the Canadian School Library Association, and so that is something that all boards will use for this type of process. And in terms of what you were describing, it's true. You know, there is subjectivity within each of those. Hence the reason why not one person alone is making that judgment. So people are working in community within their schools with an advisory team as well, in order to ensure that there are different lenses on the piece. And as we said in the presentation as well, even if it is an individual who's the teacher librarian who's racialized and has certain lived experiences, that person is not deemed as the only individual that is making that decision either. So again, it's in community with others so that different perspectives are there in order to make appropriate choices.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, just I guess my last comment is, so just for clarity, as I end my line of questioning, we don't have a list of the books that are inherently problematic, and aside from the race component, you know, irrelevant or of duplication, we don't, and we don't know how many have been gone. Question for you, Chair. Am I allowed to end my line of questioning now and come back later for motions, or do we? Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thank you, staff, for asking the questions.
Thank you, Trustee Alves. I have Trustee Beaver.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, Chair. So I heard you say, and I've heard this from other people, that we've neglected the process, right, for a period of time, and now we're jumping in. And it's led to what we've heard from our delegation, and thank you very much for the delegation. I've heard from so many people that 2/3 of the inventory of books at the library are going to be removed. Because of, you know, we'll call it the date, clarification. Now I've heard tonight that, well, you don't, it's a kind of maybe a flexible date. Did you imagine this to be happening to our libraries, that we were going to lose that many books before you started the training?
Thank you for that question, and I am going to pass it on to Coordinating Principal Steve Kinnyside, through the chair.
As we shared during the presentation, the 2008 date is not a blanket statement. Older resources may stay in the collection if they meet the following criteria. They're accurate to the board curriculum, the ministry curriculum, excuse me. They are accurate in terms of factual information. They align with board priorities and board initiatives, and they're responsive to student interest and engagement. Some older titles have continued to stay in school libraries and may even be repurchased because of wear and tear. For example, as I shared, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Harry Potter, The Hobbit, The Great Gatsby, etc. Repurchasing is a normal practice with consumable items. To your question as to whether or not we anticipated the degree of books to be weeded, I don't know that we've ever seen 2/3 of the library weeded. We have not received a report when school libraries are completed. They are obligated to submit a report of weeded titles. No school library has submitted a report that indicates that 2/3 of the library has been weeded.
I appreciate that comment. I'm not going to argue that, but maybe they're going to submit the report after they're we're in the dumpster now in recycling. But I'm not being critical about this. In the Education Act, trustees are responsible for the stewardship of the board's resources. This is taxpayers' money that the government gives us that went to buy these books. So we can't just be throwing them out if there is no mold, yes. If they're inappropriate for many reasons, which you have guidelines on, and I'm fine with that. But to just throw books out just for the sake of putting books out without having a replacement causes a problem. It's like coming into my home. I'm doing a renovation. Let's throw out everything except what's new. I'm left with a TV and I can't sit on a couch. I can't, lie in my bed. And it'll take 5 years before I get all of that stuff put in. So wouldn't it be good to have a phased-in approach to this, to say maybe let's put the date back to 2000 or whatever, and then every 2 years or every year move the date up 2 years until we catch up to a place. And it also allows you to replenish in a more timely event rather than saying, oh, I need to replace a lot of books. We've heard from the delegation the quantity of books that has to do, and I'll ask questions on it. So wouldn't that have been a better systematic approach when faced with these potential large removals that weren't all for inappropriateness? They were obviously for some date regard, because I heard comments from teachers, unsolicited. They came up to me and said, Brad, do you know they're throwing out a book all about magnets and it's in perfectly good condition? Then I've been told the librarian was instructed to throw out all fairy tale books. So I get concerned when I hear those things, and I'm not hearing it third hand, I'm hearing it directly. So I would think that we should maybe step back and pause the process or phase it and allow it to go slower. So getting back to trustees Davies and also trustee Ells about no list. We have, I've always said the problem of education is there's schools of isolation. Every school is its own situation that leads its own scenario, and what may be happening in another school may not happen in another, and it's very important from the system to manage the continuity that we have the same books and the same references that support our students that aren't offensive here and not being offensive there. And it's very important that we manage that system-wideness. And so going to, with technology today, it's not like I have to submit a list in paper and submit it. Today it's SharePoint, put it on in there, and you can go to your central librarians and they can be resourced to say, hey, these are the books we found, other people found, and it helps other librarians. Oh, okay, I didn't know that book. Okay, I haven't read them all, or I don't, because you're making them read every book and everything, which they have a job too to do in their stuff. So when you have this collective resources, when people come together, they can share it. So having a centralized list makes so much more sense to help you do your job and help all the librarians. Don't get me wrong, librarians are great, they do a great job. And I'm not saying they don't. I'm just saying it helps for everyone to be on the same page and be consistent. That as Trustee Davies says, one book that's bad in one school is considered offensive is not considered the opposite in another school. And that's what we're trying to do, is make things equal across our system. So I would just suggest that be considered. I think it makes a lot of sense. And thank you, through you, Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Trustee McDonald. And we'll have Trustee Riddick. Through you, Chair. Oh, you're right.
First, let me start off by saying, as an avid reader, I really respect the reading process because it really does allow a library to replenish and renew their library circulation. And we always want to ensure that we're putting new topics, new titles in front of our children and giving them the options to be able to read them, which helps them to broaden their horizons, right, and expand their thinking. That's saying that coming from an early childhood background. Now, I do have a question, a couple of questions. I'm going to start off with, a little while ago, in response to Trustees McDonald's question, you said that the libraries are required to submit a report of the titles that were weeded. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair. Yes, that's correct. Our weed report is submitted, the rationale for each weed. So to the question maybe earlier, if I had a book on magnets and it was weeded because it was moldy, that was that unique decision for that book. We do not have the reference for why each book went out in that location, but we do have a summary of what would be removed in each location. Those would be due at the end of June.
Okay, thank you for that. So can you explain then, if that's the case, I specifically recall being asked for that list, to share that list in December. Why were we told that no such list existed?
And thank you for the question, and through you, Chair. We haven't generated any lists at this point. So we've just started the weeding process, so we do not have lists of what is being taken off shelves. What we do have is a list of which schools have completed or where they are in the process of weeding. That's what we have. We do not have a list per se of the book titles. And I think that was inaccurate in terms of the information that was just shared in a response earlier. We do not have a list of books that are being banned. That is not the process here that we're engaging in at all. And can I just also share, just to complete with what Trustee McDonald was saying earlier as well, that what we are doing as in terms of all of this work is that we're also in a very interesting context within Peel, that we do have a ministry directive that caused us to take action and has very greatly indicated the problematic nature of our collections. And so that is why we are going forward with the plan to curate titles that are reflective of our community and ensure that they are also meeting our new guidelines for the curriculum. So I wanted to make that correction.
I think you have any follow-up? Yeah. Through you, Chair. I think I could probably say for all of us, we agree with the weeding process, with weeding in general. The issue that many of us are having is when we walk into schools, there are so many empty shelves, and when you talk to the librarian in the library, the books are being weeded by the date. No other criteria. And that is where many of us have a real issue. None of us have an issue with removing books that are musty, torn, or racist, outdated. But by reading a book, removing a book from a shelf based simply on its date is unacceptable. And yes, I witnessed it.
Thank you for sharing that information, and through you, Chair, that is very disappointing for us to hear as well, because that is not the direction that we are given through the training. And so certainly that is something for us to take back in terms of the type of training that we are providing to ensure clarity for the folks that are engaging in this process. So thank you for bringing that to our attention.
No, go ahead. So Trustee Green brought up a very good question, and it was a question that had been on my mind. You are engaging the students in the process of purchasing books. However, you're not involved in them in the removal of books. This is their lives, their experiences that you're impacting. To say you cannot ask students to do that, you really actually do need to ask them this. For example, one of your conditions is if a book hasn't been taken out in the last 5 years, you're removing it from the shelf. I happen to know that I, along with many students, do not take out the books. They read them in the library. Therefore, they would never be taken out. And then, when you're removing them, have you considered that factor?
I appreciate that question, and through you, Chair, circulation data is student voice. So that's very primarily how we understand what kind of books are being taken out of the library learning commons. So the circulation data does tell us which books are being taken off the shelves regularly, definitely. And at the same time, to your point, that students are taking books and looking at them in the library. And we do have staff in libraries that are also recognizing which books students are engaging in and interested in. That is part of the teacher librarian job, to be interacting with students while they're in the library learning commons and seeing what kind of things are they're interested in. And so by having those conversations with students and students with one another, we have BSAs that are engaging with this work as well. We have other groups of students that are providing different input, including at the central level, asking students for input in terms of what types of books and other resources that they would like to see in a learning commons. So all of that is taken into consideration, but you are correct. The circulation data is very important to us, because if students are not taking books from the library, that speaks volumes to us as well. And that there are other ways that teacher librarians engage with students and classes to determine what is it that students want, what is it that needs to be purchased to continue to replenish and enhance the library collection, and so on. So very important, and thank you for that.
Thank you, Trustee Bailey. I have Trustee Cole online.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
You're good.
Thank you. I think Brad McDonald asked the question already and had it answered, but I guess I'll state more of a feeling than anything. But I mean, there's children that, don't always attend the same school. They move to different wards, they attend different schools. And I feel like, with all the different input we get, at the end of the day, we might not have any books left on our shelves. So I'm thinking more in terms of maybe like a central hub that I don't know, that the books have to pass through to get, a certain approval to take them off the shelves. And what determines moldy? Is this up to interpretation by all the different librarians? Is there a specific thing that they have to look for? I'm trying to figure that out. It doesn't make any sense to me. I've seen books that have been thrown off shelves considered moldy, and maybe I'm new, but I see no mold. Is this left up to interpretation, or how is this being done?
Thank you for your question, and through you, Chair. With your first question with regards to moldy, that would be with the professional judgment of the teacher librarian to determine, as well as other staff, to determine whether or not it is suitable, the book with mold, to remain on the shelf. Usually it's black spots that are seen on books, and we've seen them ourselves, that are quite dangerous and could cause health issues for students who are engaging with those texts. We also train them to show them what these moldy pieces look like on books. So that's part of the training as well. And just to note that no library learning commons across any school in the PDSB has common collections. There may be some common books within each of them, but they've all been curated in different ways to reflect the community that they serve. And so there is not going to be, it's not a Walmart kind of experience, right? So essentially every school has unique sets of books. Some schools are older with many, many older books in them, and it may be a larger collection, and newer schools may have smaller collections. So each collection varies from school to school.
Okay, so I guess my final thought then is a lot of this is up to interpretation by the librarian.
And no other follow-ups, Trustee Cole?
Would that be correct, that a lot of this is up to interpretation?
If you're referring to the mold?
That as well as the school books themselves and the reason they're being taken off the shelves.
Yes, as we've described through this presentation, and we have repeated through the various responses that we've been given, there is a great deal of professional learning that's happening to build the capacity of the educators that are engaging in this process.
Anything further, Trustee Cole?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you. Trustee Peelschools, do you have another follow-up question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and I appreciate the opportunity to do this. And I think, Trustee Bailey really, put it to a point, we're all here. We all want to read books. We all agree. It's not that we're disagreeing with that. I think it's really come to the process of weeding. And, depending on your experience, libraries are different in each group, of elementary to middle school to high school. I'll very big generalization. A lot of the library is focused on in elementary to different learning levels, of reading levels, and getting that going, and then other subject curriculum stuff. And then you get to high school, then it gets more focused because now you're taking English classes and you're doing history and you're doing physics and you're doing all that, so it gets very specialized. So when it comes to hiring, which you talked about, I'm curious how that is done. Do you say, okay, let's say 100% of your money, here it is that you say, let's take high school because maybe it's easier. We'll pick so many math, so many history, so many sports, so many, English, I'll put, a social equity and those kind of things. How is that? Because I didn't really see that. You said it was just left to the librarian. So, how do we ensure that, a library has that complete breadth of information?
Thank you for that question, and through you, Chair, I will ask Coordinating Principal Stephen Kinnyside to respond.
There's a lot in that question, and I'll try to take it apart and address each of the concerns. First and foremost, when you reference high school materials, and I'll address that to begin with. High school materials can be found in many places. The weeding of school libraries has nothing to do with the resources that may be used in a physics class, history class, or otherwise. They would have their own teacher resources or departmental resources that would support the curriculum in those ways. The second piece is that when we've talked about the replenishment plan, we've been very specific in the training with how that replenishment plan needs to be used. And we are building in processes to ensure accountability on that spending. So to that point, with regards to the monies that are coming from central and sent to the schools, those monies are to be directed specifically to nonfiction resources, and we are building in processes to ensure that is the case. That is particularly the plan because we have noticed that in some pilot situations, as we have weeded, we have tried to align our resources with our current curriculum. We have found that we are out of date with current curriculum, and so we have the greatest area of need, if you will, in nonfiction resources. So we've targeted that particular area. We've also provided guidance around, and we referenced it in our presentation, around a certain amount of money per pupil to be allocated to teacher librarians for the replenishment over the next 5 years. And further, within that training, we do discuss that 25% of that augmented funds should be directed to nonfiction as well.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I think it would be nice as trustees, I think we would love to be a little bit more aware of that guidance rather than say there's guidance. We would be just feel comforted to see what that guidance would be. And I appreciate that. So the second item, so going back to a few comments that have been made. I have this group of books that has been, the library's gone through and followed your processes and thrown your musty, and so there's some offensive books, okay? We're gonna, you know, we're landfill, we're not landfilling them, we're recycling them. We got moldy books, I'm not sure what we do those, probably a little different, but maybe recycling. But then there's, according to your musty, there's irrelevant, there's not been taken out, and there's stuff. So that doesn't mean they're not good books. So, you know, I'm going to use the expression, someone's garbage is someone's treasure. And, you know, being someone of resources, and if it falls in this, not this throw-out category, but really a category that's just not, we don't see a use for it, but there may be a use for it category, why wouldn't we be offering that up to, you know, if it's elementary set of schools, which are reading levels of different kind of stuff that can be great for newcomers to the country, or all kinds of things. You know, maybe we're into science books and what have you in high school, and you know that helps you know, children study and stuff. So I'm just asking, why don't we do something with that group?
Through you, Chair. The reference to irrelevant, I think, material. We're talking about materials that might end history in 1982. It is no longer being it's no longer current to our current curriculum. That material, while it might be factually accurate, is no longer fully accurate in terms of our understanding of history, as an example. We have plenty of resources that will support, to your question, early literacy development. The Library Support Services provides resources in terms of our online databases, like Gale in Context, that provides resources that can be changed at a click of a button to different reading levels with the same resource to support the early language acquisition and the development of English language skills for students for whom English is not their first language. There are better, more appropriate resources than an older, irrelevant history book or book about computers with floppy disks that should be used in those cases.
And through you, Chair, I appreciate your perspective, but I guess my perspective is, you know, goes back to my analogy of, you know, what our stuff, our junk can be someone else's treasure, and it's irrelevant for whatever, or it's just old. I'm not talking history, I'm talking reading levels. That, you know, you just say, hey, it's past its date. You know, you put a date limit on it. It's still a good book. It's not offensive. It's not inappropriate. It's not moldy. Why wouldn't we offer that through some you know, process or people to see if they're interested in it, rather than just going, no, it's not good enough, you know, we're not good enough for us, it's not good for anyone. And, you know, I'm just going to leave it. I don't need to answer. You gave me your first answer. I'm just going to appreciate you, Chair, for your guidance here, but thank you so much for letting me have a second set question.
Thank you, Trustee McDonald. I have Trustee K. McDonald online, and then I have Trustee Bailey.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I just wanted to respond to the one man's treasure is another man's poison. I am very happy that you have a policy of no redirected resources, and I would encourage you to do that, because I don't believe that one man's poison is another man's treasure. As a new trustee, and that's why I asked the question, I know when we were going through back in, I think, 2006, when Agnes Taylor did their reading process that I was involved with, a lot of junk was dumped there from other schools, and it was not a treasure for Agnes Taylor, it was junk for them also. I think, you know, again, as a new trustee, I was at Sarah Winnie. I actually saw a kid with a whole set of little red spots on her. I'm like, what is that? And when I looked closely, she was playing with a big stuffed, round stuffed toy that came from another school, which I won't name. And it was there, they didn't want it there, and it was supposed to be a treasure for the children at Sir Winston Churchill, and it was junk, and it had bed bugs. I think we are, if a book is irrelevant, I feel very strongly about that. And, you know, I can go on and on, like what the IMF does. They dump all the old machinery that doesn't work into the poor Caribbean nations, and we have to spend millions of dollars employing their technicians every month to fix these things that don't work. If it's junk for one person, or it's irrelevant for one group, it should remain irrelevant for all. And I would strongly advocate that we do not redirect irrelevant materials to any other group, be it a charity, be it in another school, nobody. And I feel very strongly about that. That's just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee McDonald. Trustee Bailey?
I think she hits it.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Through the chair, I just wanted to thank you for those comments and just circle back with what you're saying, and to Trustee McDonald that one of the quotes that we have here through our presentation is from the Right to Read report, the most recent early literacy report. The failure of the school boards to provide students with current books that are appropriate for their level of reading, relevant to their experiences and identities, and reflective of the diversity of Ontario undermines students' ability to meet their full potential. And we need to keep that in mind as well, that public libraries versus our libraries, our library learning commons, we are not the holder of all good books. We are the holder of books that will meet curriculum expectations, board priorities, and interests of our students. So we must remember that. Thank you.
And excuse me, through your chair, I just skipped 2 examples I had, if you'd indulge me. Also, like I remember again, you had book maps change, for example. So it doesn't matter how beautiful, well-preserved a book is. If the map is outdated and that's a map of in the 1970s or the 1980s and the world has changed, now it's 2023, I think it doesn't matter. Nobody should be getting that book as a map of the world, right? And same thing, you know, if you have a book that says Pluto is a planet, we have moved beyond Pluto being a planet now. So you give that lovely book to some that irrelevant book to some other person, you're giving them bad information. And that child, as the superintendent just said, Superintendent Bernadette, we are now giving misinformation to another precious person. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Kay McDonald. Trustee Bailey?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. One of the constant themes that I've heard both you, Superintendent Bernadette has said, and several trustees have said, is the importance of having relevant current information for students. But one of the issues, one of the words that I keep hearing you saying is, we don't have banned books. We're not banning books. We don't have banned titles. We're not creating lists for banned books, okay? However, the Peel District School Board has one curriculum for each grade. And if it's not good enough for one school, it's not good enough for another school. So if a title is not good enough for Lincoln Alexander, it's not good enough for Judith Nyman, then it should be on a list to say, this book is not good enough for any student in Peel District School Board. I understand that you do not want banned books. However, we can change the name from banned books to something else to say books that are irrelevant or books that do not meet the criteria for the Peel District School Board, and put it that way, so that way we don't have banned books, right? The end of the day is all Peel District School Board students are important and they are valued, and it should not be subjective. No, none of this process should ever be subjective. One of these children is my child. I wouldn't want him to go into a school to say, oh, I'm going to their library, and be offended because that book's not in his school, but he's in another school visited, and he's offended. So why is it okay for them to have that book and not this school? So at the end of the day, you have to have equity some way, somehow. Whether you're doing banned books or calling it books that are not relevant, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we need to ensure that all children have access to the same materials. That is for their community, yes, but also across the board.
Thank you so much for those comments. And through you, Chair, we'd like to ask the applicant to jump in. She is online and would like to respond to those comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. Thank you so much for that question. But you have to, we're trying to not only clean up our school library learning commons, but also build systemic changes to reassure that we never end up in the same situation again. And in order to do that, we need to build capacity within our teacher librarians, in fact, within all educators in all school buildings, to be able to recognize harm, whether it is in a book, in a film, in any kind of resources that we serve with our students. So by creating lists, what we're doing is we're denying the opportunity for our teachers to build their capacity and their critical consciousness in order to be able to spot and stop harm. Because if I give them a list, because I see it, that teacher librarians will never have that experience to grow their critical consciousness. Having said that, we are going to be providing some training when we get to the audit part. Right now is not the audit part. We're doing the weeding part. And that's where we're going to be training teacher librarians in community so that what I know about my own lived experience, I can leverage with your lived experience so that everyone can not only take care of these books, but also grow and become better humans. If a teacher librarian does not have the capacity to weed out a book, how are they buying equitable resources? So it is systemic changes. We're not just cleaning up libraries because we never want to be in this situation again. So we're making sure that we're cleaning it up and building capacity so that this doesn't happen ever again. So we must take the time to do it right. Because if we just say, okay, here's a list, we haven't built capacity around that.
Thank you for that. In hearing that, I'm not okay with you training children off the backs of my child. I'm really not okay with that. You're saying that they're not going to be able to build capacity through a list. If that list is done right, you can use that list for training and helping them to understand why it's causing harm. And I would expect that every book that goes on that list would be explained to the staff for them to get to and understand why it's on that list. It's not just that here's the list, you're taking it away, taking those books off. It's a why are these books removed? What kind of harm that they're doing? You are using that list to now train the staff, so therefore they can understand what they are looking for going forward. To just say, oh, they won't learn anything by just giving them a list, then that's you guys' job to teach.
Like I said, thank you so much, Chair. Like I said before, this comes in step 2. We are not touching step 2. As we go through step 2, which starts in 2023-24, the training that we need to do as library support services will take place by us to our teacher librarians. And we will be training teacher librarians. The school administrators will have also the responsibility to train their staff through our equity standards to respond to board priorities with all of that. So the process that you're describing is going to take place. It's just not at the weed, it's the audit. The audit of what is harmful, where racist content comes in step 2. We are doing step 1 right now, which doesn't really address the audit of anti-racist, anti-colonial, and anti-oppressive work. That all of that training will come into place in 2023, 2024.
Through you, Chair. I'm not sure if what we hear here translates to what happens out there, because when we go into schools and we're talking to to families and parents and children and all of that, what we're hearing versus what we're hearing from you seems to be different. Just like in December, when we were told that the process hadn't been started, and yet there were still empty shelves out there before. So can you help us understand how is it that you keep telling us one thing and then we're experiencing something else?
Sorry, through you, Chair. Yeah, and we're going to recognize that, Trustee Bailey, that there is potential, and we understand that there's inconsistency out there, and that's why we're here today, for sure. From the comments from Trustee Cameron, and from comments from all of you, either in December and moving forward. This is why we're here, and it's that feedback is what we're going to build on to make sure that there is definitely more consistency around training and more explicitly sharing with staff what the team is saying and what they're not saying with respect to what stage they're at. So totally appreciate that. And I think, one of the things I'm most hopeful for, and I think one of the things that hasn't been surfaced as of yet, is that in potentially some of our pilot schools, there has been an enormous uptake of circulation data for kids using libraries. The libraries were ill-used in the past, and I wish we had more data to support that around some books that hadn't been circulated in over 5, 6, 7 years. And then what our hopes is that, the analogy is we have to crack an egg to make the omelet. We were going to see empty shelves, potentially. But in short order, we're going to see shelves in a more vibrant situation where your child is coming to the library because they see themselves represented, not only in the book as their identity, but the interests in which they have. And so that is our hope, that the increase that the library, the criteria or the definition of what the library used to be is going to change into a more vibrant experience for the child. Moving forward. So right now we're in a stage where people, they're attached to books, even books that are unused. Myself, I find it very difficult to unleash some of the piles of books that I haven't used in over 20 years from my household. It pains me to do so. But also, as you are, I am too, an avid reader. I can't wait for the next one. And so our hope is over the course of the next little while that we are not just filling libraries with books for the sake of seeing stacked shelves. We're filling libraries because we're building excitement and invigorating students in order to see themselves represented, and the use of those books because it's relevant to everyday life. The social context, the context of where we live right now, not to go see a map that is antiquated and this 30 years old, that's representative of where we are right now. And we can't do that. And like we said, and one of the other things I wanted to highlight that is very important in this piece is the emphasis around the principal's obligation and the superintendent to ensure that there are funds to continue to replenish the library. That's been lacking. I will tell you, we have data that some administrators haven't put a cent into a library in years, where others have put enormous funds to do that, to keep that up, to keep the library vibrant and up. And those who are doing that, the librarian is weeding because they have to make space in order to do that. Right. So I think so when we talk about consistency, there was a massive inconsistency for years around schools, depending on where you were and the emphasis placed by that administrator to drive resources into the library. So we're hoping that this is just the beginning of something that will be earth-shattering, to be honest. I will say one more thing. I was with a teacher librarian over the weekend, and they said, Paul, I've had community come to me and ask to change the library into a gymnasium, a phys ed space, because this space in my library, if I take away the teachers coming into the library using the space, in 1 year's time, she was keeping the data, I had 63 students, 63 secondary students come into a library to take out a book. That's appalling. We need to expand that. We need to make that a space where kids see themselves represented and they're actually going and looking for books, taking out books, being excited about books, and connecting it to curriculum. And and as I think according Principal Peelschools was sharing, a library that will have resources for curriculum connections for sure, but then there are other spaces that there will be other books. But those need to be updated, right? Those need to be continually updated, and we need to create space for that.
Last comment. Thank you for that, Associate Silva. I just want to make it clear, I'm not against Whedon. None of us are against the Whedon. It's the process in which that we've had issues with and the lack of transparency of the whole process. That's what we've had problems with, and that's what we're speaking to.
Thank you, Trustee Bailey. I do have a couple of questions. I'm going to try and keep this very brief because you've all been wonderful and given us a lot of time here tonight. And I also really appreciate the questions that have come to the table from my fellow trustees tonight. Like you, A.D. Silva, my house is full of books. And like every room, you're going to find shelves, you're going to find stacks, they're just there. And I agree with what Trustee Bailey has said, is that we understand that there needs to be updating of shelves. Like I've got kids who are growing up, we're constantly going through and saying, okay, what are you no longer reading? Because our shelves are full. And so what can we pass on and share with other friends to make sure that we're not just sitting on books that we aren't reading? And so it is important that we're keeping our resources updated and relevant for the people who are, we're hoping are going to be reading them. And that makes me sad to hear of a school where they only had 63 secondary students in a year. I lived in my library in high school. I was there all the time. I read like crazy. I pulled anything I could find off the shelf. So we want kids to feel excited and engaged in what is being offered. So yes, I think we all understand that it's important to make sure that our libraries make sense for our students. But I agree, we do just have some questions about how this is going being done. I did have a quick question of clarification. So what I heard before is that books cannot be recycled if they have a cover that has a coating or laminating on it, right? I think that's every single book in my house. Like if you pick up a Babysitter's Club book from 30 years ago, because I definitely have those on my shelf, then that's got a coated cover. Are we finding that there are even any paperbacks that can be recycled if that's the criteria? We might not have that information. I'm curious.
So through you, Chair, we have piloted this and we have found books that can be recycled.
Okay.
And that's why we gave that direction from the beginning. We are clear in the trade. We have had, like I said, every family of schools that's been trained, and there's been one north and one south high school training. We are to train the last family of schools on May 16th. Okay. So we have done, I think, 15 trainings now, and I was at all of them. Mm-hmm. We have presented the same slide deck, the same script, and the same accompanying resources and activities in each one of them. So yes, there are recyclable books, but to your point, a lot of books do have a coding on each page. And that is the language that I shared earlier, is the language from the Region Appeals website around recycling and waste management. So we take guidelines from them. We do our best to recycle what we can, but we wouldn't have numbers as to what has hit recycling as opposed to waste at this time, because we are so early in implementing this process. Many schools have not started, and many schools have just begun. Apart from the few schools that did pilot the process.
Okay, I must have misunderstood before that it was only if it was coded on each page rather than just the cover. So will we be removing, we don't have to go into all the details, but I just wonder if we would be removing covers from paperback novels so that the rest of the book can be recycled. That seems like a pretty arduous process. So I don't know if that's what's going on. So that's more of a comment, I think, than something we have to dive into, because again, we've been through a lot of questions tonight. But I do find that interesting. I have 27 schools that I represent, and I can tell you that anytime I visited a school, they have already been in the process. And going back to December when we were first having this conversation, one of the first schools I visited had told me that they had already removed 2,000 titles and they had a long way to go still. I visited another school that told me they'd been through 2 dumpsters, and they specifically said dumpsters of books. So I do think it is important that that is what we have been seeing when we're, visiting schools in our communities. And so that's, that's a lot. that's a huge volume of books. We have 259 schools in the board. If we were only losing 2,000 titles per school, that's 500,000 books. So what we're talking about is a significant volume. So I think it's understandable that we're hearing concern now from the community when they're saying, what is happening? Can you tell us more about why in the process? And, I've had that same question. I am a parent in the board. I obviously work for the board at this stage, and I have had questions about the process throughout this time. So I am glad that you've all come to have this conversation with us. And I know you've put a lot of work into it, and we do want to make sure we're providing the best that we can for our students. But that is a lot of books, and so it is going to be reasonable for people in the community to ask about that, because it's hard to see, it's hard to picture. Something that I really liked that Trustee Bailey said, and something that I think is a good way for us to sort of reframe the way that we're doing this work. Instead of talking about banned books, nobody wants to ban books. We want books available. We want people to be able to read. Some of the, some books that are on banned lists are considered some of the greatest works of literature. It doesn't necessarily mean that they need to be everywhere all the time, but we want them to be available. That said, when we're talking about these 259 schools and recognizing there's different grade levels in there, we do want to make sure that there's some consistency in what is available to our students, but also what's put in front of our students. And I think it's a fair question to say, if this is being removed for a good reason from one school, why is it not being removed for a good reason from another school? And maybe rather than talking about creating a list to ban, maybe we talk about the high standards in the materials that we want to be offering our students. I don't want my kids to pick something up off the shelf that has been missed in an audit that might not be the best thing for them to read. I'm not saying that it's a bad book, but maybe there's just something in there that's dated, even though it's otherwise considered a great book. And maybe then they have friends at another school and they had different encounters with material. I want them to understand that they're getting, I want high standards of books for my kids who are in Peelschools right now. And if they have to be removed for a specific reason, and I understand that we also have the KISS 5 process, which is a different thing than what we're doing here. At the same time, if we are reporting that we're taking these books off the shelf and there's a good reason for it, could we not at the same time, and I recognize this is a big ask for the people who are doing this work, if they're already reporting that they're taking, Joe likes his bike off the shelf, maybe say why it's coming off the shelf, whether it's because the book is not a real book, I don't think, because it's damaged, because it's dated, because there's something in there that could be harmful. And then I think rather than saying, okay, well, we're doing this work for the teacher librarians and not giving them the opportunity to learn what may be more appropriate or just better resources for the students, maybe when we're creating a list of books that don't meet our high standards, that's coming from the work that's being done in schools. And I don't think that means that, like, okay, we're going to hand you out a book of 1,000 or a list of 1,000 books that are fine for students to have, but rather this is what we've learned from other teacher librarians and staff who are doing this process. And this is why we've decided to make these decisions, or they've decided to make these decisions in their schools. And that may be helpful for other schools who are looking for that information too. Just a thought.
So through you, Chair, I want to share a little bit what happens at the training. We talked about some training, some strategies for reading. One strategy is when they're going through, again, we've talked about harmful tonight, and I think we need to reinforce that harmful as it comes as racist materials or oppressive materials, misogynist materials, etc. That is step 2. Right, we are not dealing with step 2.
It is happening now, though, just for clarity.
Right.
Yeah.
So if by chance a book might come up as harmful during the reading process because they're cracking open a book and they see that they're looking for curricular relevance and they see something that's harmful, then that's a step 2 conversation, which again needs to be done in community, as we referenced in our presentation. The teacher librarian is not the sole person that is responsible for that process. When we train, we also indicate that as we said in the presentation, we train them in their families at schools, so they have a professional network to rely upon. If they are noticing things, want to talk about things, we have our office hours. They're working in their professional networks, so they can rely on each other to help surface experiences that have occurred in different places. Lastly, when it comes to, you referenced the curation of high quality resources. Library Support Services continues to be committed to providing different level grade book reviews that don't say this is a great book or a bad book, but it provides the teacher librarian, the educator, with enough information about what's in the book so they can make that professional judgment as to whether or not it's a great book for their location. Every location needs to curate a collection that supports the curriculum, the board priorities, and the student interest in that building. And the student interest in each building will vary. We have talked at some length about examples of classics that may exist in one school and may not exist in another school, based on things like circulation data. Circulation data that suggests that the Great Gatsby needs to stay at this school, but may not live at another school because no one's taken it out in the last 15 years. Okay, so we're going to make some space for another good book, as you said, books that are great resources that our kids are going to love. Thank you.
Okay, and sorry, I just wanted, before I give up my my time here, I just want to make sure I've got everything I wanted to. Yeah, okay, I do feel that there's, what I'm hearing back from people in the community and from educators and from teacher librarians, that there may be some misunderstanding of what the asks are. I've read everything that has come in front of me, so I understand what the asks are, but maybe there seems to be some misunderstanding, and I don't know if there's a way to improve that messaging so that people are maybe all feeling like they're on the same page. And I think that's some of what we're seeing. I mean, my inbox has been wild for a little while now. We're seeing it in the media. There is a petition. People are asking these questions because they don't understand. So if we can be clearer with people about what this process is and let them understand, I think that would be useful. Because right now there does seem to be that misunderstanding, and I can tell you, like, I've had teacher librarians tell me that they are removing books, and it seems like they're right on the stage 3 at this point. And so it seems like maybe across the board there is some misunderstanding of what they are expected to do, and that it's supposed to be 3 stages. Because I had one school tell me that they're done. They're like, okay, I'll finish. And if they're not supposed to be there yet, then there's a misunderstanding.
And through you, Chair, so the weeding process has been happening by many teacher librarians. It's part of their job, right? So the step 1, 2, 3 is a scaffolded approach that we've created, but certainly there will be some auditing and some representation that's being looked at as books are going through, depending on the expertise of the teacher as well. So some will have gone through the process and are further ahead. And again, it's the weeding right now that we have an expectation that it's done by the end of June. And so that's very critical. And I've forgotten my other point that I wanted to make. Oh, I know, with regards to communication. So we are working with our communication department, and we are going to be putting information out on, Stephen has said already, on our library support services site for educators internally, as well as externally for families to be able to access information and have more accurate information rather than interpretation of what is happening. So we are moving to that as well, just to assure you that that's going to be happening.
Great, thank you. Just one more point before I cede the floor. I think we recognize that transparency and accountability are key values that we want to be achieving as a board, and that's something that I always want to, that I know I'm always thinking about when we're doing anything. Our work as trustees, part of our responsibility is to help build the confidence in this board and in the work that everyone is doing to do the best for our students. And again, as a parent, I want the best for my kids. I want the best for all the kids in my community, for all the kids right across the field. I think that's really important. But when we're talking about people having that trust and confidence in our system, part of that comes from transparency and accountability and understanding what is being done at the board. And when we see all these questions and this misunderstanding, that makes people feel like they don't really have a handle on what's happening at this incredible organization that is doing this work for their children. And so, as we continue forward, I would hope that we would see more of that transparency coming back, because I think there are a lot of people who have questions. I can tell you I have questions. And if we can sort of, increase what we're doing there so people feel like they understand what's happening, I don't think we're gonna get the same kind of questions from the community if they really get what's going on. But I think that's just a note to carry all the time. So anyways, that's the last thing that I had, because everyone else covered, I think, everything else in my pages of notebook. And I will go to Trustee Ellis.
Thank you, Chair Promoli. I'm going to start with the preamble, but give notice that I'll be bringing a motion in this comment and ask that it be recorded vote. Earlier, trustees were talking about, treasures and what is old could be great and maybe not. Old books that have existed before 2008 and relevance. And in that conversation, two books, three titles that just jumped in my mind. The Iliad by Homer, an epic poem about ancient Greece, considered one of the greatest works of Western literature. Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. They're just countless old books that have been in existence from time immemorial that, while are outdated, Charles Darwin has been refuted for some of the discoveries he made on in that book, The Origin of Species, but remains a foundation for modern biology. We look at old maps and we know they're outdated, but I still think that they have, people thought the Earth was flat. We know it's round, but I still think that some, in some of the right context, some of these things are important. So that's just a comment. Moving to my motion. Earlier, we talked about fiduciary responsibility and how much importance staff place on purchasing these new books, and I think that is just fantastic. The staff are having to show a justification for the purchase of a new book, and I think that's fantastic. And I do want to underscore that, like my colleagues have said tonight, the weeding of books is great. I'm glad that it's happening. I think we all have our own thoughts on the way it's happening and how it's happening and what's being taken out. And one thing that I wanted to note specifically is we're placing this great importance on the purchase, but it's not reflected in the justification for the removal. So I would like to place a motion now on the floor to ask staff to bring us a new report with a proposal with two key elements, a metric and a matrix for defining specifically why a book is removed and its definition. So if that book is being removed for irrelevance, that it be listed in catalog, or if it's being removed because of a racist term or whatever it may be within the MUSTY acronym, that book be identified in catalog for our reference, the public's knowledge. And I would like to ask that when books are removed for things like mold or destruction, that they also be cataloged and that there be some kind of, for lack of a better word, someone can wordsmith this after, but not proof of the damage, but some kind of record keeping. So we know, okay, this book was really inherently moldy just for our own fiduciary responsibility. And that those, totals be accurate.
So what's the motion?
So in summary, the motion is to ask staff to bring us a new report amended with those two proposals, creating a metric and a matrix to catalog books, both offensive and otherwise, or damaged.
Okay, so I mentioned earlier that I've never chaired a meeting before, so.
Sorry, and that, forgive me, I've written it down here and I missed it, sorry. So that the school library staff immediately halt the removal and destruction of books from the library's current collection. So today forward, that no more books are thrown out for any reason and no more books are removed from shelves from any reason until we have the new report come back with the metric and matrix for cataloging. And then we recommence that process once that function exists, so the public and the board have that for record.
Okay, so so first we need to put it on the floor and then it's open for discussion. Is that correct, Catherine? Oh, right, but
Yeah, I was just gonna say we need a seconder, and I would also like some clarity on that.
Okay.
Are you saying that there should be the report that comes back has to have already the categories and the cataloging of the reasons?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. So for clarity, I'm saying that from this point forward, no more books go into the dumpster until we have a new report that comes with 2 catalogs that just say, this is a book that we're throwing in the trash or recycling because it was one of the musty identifiable requirements, or because it was damaged. And that, once they can, the board can catalog a book, then it can go into the trash. But until we receive that report, that we just have a pause so that we can keep track.
Seconder. Yeah, okay. Can I get a seconder?
I will second. I will second that.
Thank you, Trustee Cameron. Okay, does anyone, sorry, Catherine, do we open this up for questions now? Thank you. Okay, does anyone have any questions? Yeah, Trustee McDonald?
I don't have any questions. I just, and I can't vote, but I will put my comment. I support, if I were voting, I would support the motion. I think we need to put a pause to it. And I think from the conversation we had at the table, I think from both sides, I think we've done a lot of learning. And I think going back and bringing back another report that maybe evaluated things with a phased-in approach, having more criteria-based, process, I think would be a little more transparent, as I'm hearing around the table. And also from your perspective, I think it makes it more transparent that we can bring to the community. And as I said, I think we need a phased approach so that we don't eliminate all the books all at one time without the ability to purchase the replacements immediately thereafter. So as I can't vote the vote, I would support the motion. Thank you.
Okay, I see Trustee K. McDonald and then Trustee Benjamin.
Yes, thank you. Through your chair, I just have a couple of questions because I'm not understanding the motion in terms of, is this motion saying that if a librarian sees a moldy book, then they can't throw it out because we have to wait for a report to come?
Thank you, through you, Chair. So my clarification is that perhaps they can, if they've got an informal way of cataloging, but the long and short of my answer is yes, that they would just wait, put it in, I'm not sure, maybe there's a sealed garbage bag in a, custodial place. I'm not exactly sure where, but I do think it's inherently important that we have this catalog in place. Because we're accountable for taxpayer dollars, and I think that from a fiduciary standpoint, Trustee Promoli chairman for our meeting today, made a great point. If 2,000 books were in one dumpster from one school across our school, that's 500,000 books. If the average cost is $12.99 times $500,000, we're well above $2.5 million to replace those books. And I just want to have an accurate understanding of how many books are gone and for which reasons. So the long and short, Trustee McDonald, is yes, pause until we have the report, and hopefully we can have the report with that catalog as soon as possible, given the urgency of this matter.
Okay, but with your math, I'm trying to understand because you're saying if there was 2,000 books that were in the dump, but if these books are racist and moldy, right? I'm not sure why we need to keep them around and find storage place, because that's a storage place for 2,000 books, right? Or we're going to just defer exposing people to books that have mold or books that are negative, right? And probably could impact their well-being. I don't understand in terms of if we have staff and capable staff to determine if a book is moldy, why would we have to save it? And even isn't that a health and safety hazard? Like, why are we keeping moldy books until a report comes?
Sure. To make an amendment to the policy to appease what I think the Trustee McDonald's point is, perhaps we only throw out the books that are inherently moldy, but for the others, Trustee McDonald, I would absolutely like the catalog for the great point that my colleague Trustee Bailey made earlier. What is racist in Caledon will be racist in Brampton. What is racist in Brampton will be racist in Mississauga, and one student should not be exposed to it. If it's racist, none of them should be. And I think it's important we catalog that and have that assessment. But also because we're both in this learning side of this change, I think it's important to understand what's being cataloged and for what reason. And then that's a question for later down the line. But that is my motion, and I'd be happy to amend it to say that if there are inherently moldy books, that they continue to be thrown out, but books being thrown out for anything other than a biohazard, they remain. in secure custody until we have this report back from staff, which again, I would hope would come within reasonable timeframes. I'm looking at our general counsellor, Catherine Locke here. I'm thinking, reasonable as 2 weeks, but I'm not sure for a month for that, just a catalog, but I'm not sure what that would be.
Okay, and the other question, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Trustee McDonald, I think Catherine Lockyer just needed to respond quickly, and then I'll come right back to you.
I think I will refer that to Bernadette to be able to, Superintendent Smith, to be able to respond to that in the timeframe, because I do think it's rather unrealistic to expect them to be able to do the work in 2 weeks.
Fair enough.
That they were planning on doing until at least the end of June, and if not into the fall, because of this past pause. So I don't think it's realistic to be able to say to them, you have to be able to produce this report immediately, when that's not the process that they have been following.
I'm saying, fair enough, whatever is reasonable. I believe the original, in December of 2022 was the first time I brought up the wanting to pause informally in conversation, so to avoid any miscommunication or for purposes of clarity, I think now, but whenever, as soon as possible, if whatever that time frame may be, if perhaps the administration could clarify what the soonest they think that they could create a matrix would be, but that would be immensely helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
So through you, Chair, I'm also thinking about where we are right now. We're in May, going into the last month of the school year, where there are many, many other tasks as well that are the responsibility of teacher librarians, educators, administrators, and so on. And so this task, I couldn't give you a timeline right now, but certainly much more than 2 weeks, more than a month, if we're going to be cataloging thousands of books, and some that have already been disposed of.
May I clarify, Chair? Sure. Thank you. I apologize for the interruption. Thank you, Chair. I'm not asking for the catalog. I'm just asking that the process be paused until an Excel catalog can be made, where they say, the administration can come back to the board and say, we've created a standardized catalog. Is it approved? Our board can approve it, and then staff can commence the continued removal of books. We just want to know that there is a centralized system in place to catalog what is offensive, so that the public and us can see what those titles are, how many there were, how many are gone, how many were damaged, how many were gone for mold and otherwise.
Sorry.
So,
Yeah,
sorry,
sorry.
just to clarify.
Okay. No, sorry. Go ahead, Bernadette. But I haven't finished. Go ahead.
So just to clarify, you're asking the central staff, our team, to create the list for schools to use. So
No, not a list, just simply, like, think of an Excel sheet with 2 columns, one that says musty and another one that would be damaged. And that's it. And then moving forward, once that list is created, staff can continue removing, but as they remove, they could say, okay, staff from Glen Forest Secondary School in the month of May removed 3,000 books. Here are the titles. The administration would say, okay, we'll catalog these into the centralized database so that we can ensure equitable distribution of the directives, so that students in Glen Forest aren't experiencing books that a student in Caledon might be experiencing. Just make sure that they're as equitable as we can be.
So just to clarify as well, that we are currently in the weeding stage, which is the job of the teacher librarian, right? So we're not yet in step 2, that's in 2023-24. So what you are requesting then is for a pause of the weeding to take place?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Yeah, and the reasons I'll cite are, my colleague, Trustee Permoli, who's chairing this committee, and others have gone into schools and visited and seen, unfortunately so, that step 2 and step 3 in some cases have already been done, unfortunately. So hopefully we can just pause this weeding process, pause step 2, which hasn't commenced, and staff can bring a report back to trustees with a matrix and a catalog system, and then we can revisit the commencement again.
Okay, so we'll take that back and let you know what would be reasonable for us, okay? Thank you.
If the motion passes.
If the motion passes, yeah.
Catherine, did you have a follow-up?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Trustee McDonald.
I just had questions. Like I truly am trying to understand this motion, because
they, with the catalog, right? You're saying that every book that is in Peel must be put in a catalog in a list and saying what is considered racist. What I don't understand what you mean when you say a catalog. I'm trying to understand.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Trustee McDonald. I'll try and be as explicitly clear as possible. What I'm suggesting is that staff bring back a report and in the interim, pause the removal of books so that they can present to us a catalog for which in future, when a racist book is found, it can be recorded. This will protect students across the Peel District School Board so that some students in Mississauga Lakeshore or Mississauga East Cooksville or Brampton or Caledon don't experience a really harmful book that might be on shelves elsewhere. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, Trustee Bailey, I did have Trustee Benjamin first, so Trustee Benjamin, Trustee Bailey, Trustee Cole.
Excuse me, Chair Pro, I haven't finished my questions.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Trustee McDonald, I thought you had, sorry, go ahead.
No, because I'm also wondering with the cost of doing this. So you want, before we continue going, so the teacher librarians are to go through all that, because I'm trying to figure out your timeline, because you expect now the teacher librarian to go through every book in the library and say what is considered racist, what is moldy, what is in the catalog.
Trustee McDonald, they're already doing that. That's part of step 2, where they'll have to read the books actually to define if they're racist. So I'm just suggesting that we write down the titles.
Right. No. So, but you're saying they have to stop it and then they have to write down the titles, right, before they can even read it. So then they have to go back and do the reading process after the titles.
No, that's not what I'm saying, Trustee McDonald. I'm simply requesting that staff bring us a template for what a catalog could be. The work that I'm suggesting would take part hand in hand with the stage 2 process. When they read the book, they write down the title. It would be the same amount of time. I'm not asking for anything more than an Excel sheet with a catalog that we could upload things to centrally to show the public what we're removing.
Sorry, I'll just jump in for just a moment because I have a question of clarity about this exchange. We understand that there is already some documenting of books that are being weeded, correct? So I think if I'm understanding Trustee Ellis correctly, what he's looking for is instead of just the list of books that are being weeded out, that included with that is the reason under the criteria of why they're being weeded out. And then hopefully for more consistency in the standards of our library offerings.
Yes, and that data be centralized so that the public and the board can see, oh, the Cat in the Hat was removed because it's racist. We should probably not have that book in other schools. Or whatever the musty, anything within that musty acronym. I'm just suggesting that we have a matrix and a metric. That's it.
Sorry, just for a point of clarification, if we say that if a book makes it on a catalog that you're suggesting, we're overstepping CIS 5, which is the operating procedure to ban a book. And I'll turn it over to Q for clarification.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So our current operating procedure, which you made reference to just on 5, allows for the process that Trustee Alice is referring to, where a constituent can, of a school source, I should say constituent, where a staff member or a constituent, anybody who has issue with a particular resource, is able to go through a process to be able to have that particular book reviewed in order to now be able to determine whether or not that particular collection, if it's going to be maintained any part of that particular collection. It does not extend to the entire board. So a decision that is made based on going through that process at a particular location is for that particular location. And so each location would need to go through their own process based on the specific titles that whomever it is would now need to bring forward.
Through you, Chair, Superintendent Hoppy, that's exactly what I'm hoping for, so that we have a catalog from each school, how many books were removed in a given year, what those titles were for that specific school, and then centrally someone can look at it and say, hey, that book was pretty problematic for Glen Forest. Maybe we consider it for somewhere else. Parents will be able to see what was removed. Yep.
So So through you, Chair, then I would suggest that in terms of the motion that's being put on the floor, that it does not need to be put on the floor because the process that they are currently engaging in, the weeding stages, can proceed because we have a process that can be looked at and reviewed in order for any objections or any questions that are being brought forward to be able to catalog the list as you're now talking about. That's something, that's a separate process that we can now engage in as part of the current operating procedure.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I respectfully decline. I would like this to be a motion where we direct staff to create the catalog. And Superintendent Hoppy, the reason being is I asked this question 5 months ago, and there's been miscommunication or misunderstanding. For the abundance of clarity, my motion today is a request through you, Chair, for a recorded vote to direct staff to bring us a report to create a matrix and metrics to identify which books are being removed and for what reason. That's all.
And stop the process.
And stop the process. Yeah, temporarily.
Through you, Chair. Again, if I may, I suggest that based on the information that's been presented that we've been going on discussing, the process to engage in making that determination is not through the weeding process. It is through another existing process through KISSOP 5 that we would now be able to now have gone through the stages of identifying that a book is problematic. Once determined as such, we would now be able to share, we can discuss sharing that information with the board.
Thank you.
So it's a separate process that allows for what you're referring to augment what you were referring to in order to not stop this process, because the weeding process is one in which has already been identified, is not getting at the issues that you're raising that you'd like to be cataloged for that purpose.
To you, Chair. Thank you, Superintendent. My motion stands, and the reason being trustees have gone to schools where they've completed step 3, and we shared this with the administration today, where they committed to taking this back for further review, because there seems to be so much confusion across the board, and unfortunately, some of these policies are being enacted ahead of time, and they shouldn't be. We have a bunch of confusion. My motion today is to temporarily pause the weeding of books until the board can return with matrix and a metrics. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go to trustee, trustee McDonald, you didn't have anything further?
No, I just, because also just the cost, my other thing was the cost that it's going to involve, but it's okay.
Okay. Thank you, trustee McDonald. I have trustee Benjamin, then trustee Bailey, then trustee Cole, just close to her hand, and trustee Davies. Okay. Oh, trustee Benjamin, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Good evening. I returned at 7:30 and I thought I'll attend the meeting. So to our governance council, am I allowed to come in late? Yes. And participate in the meeting?
Yes, trustee Benjamin, you're able to.
Okay. I just want to share, I was listening to the discussions. I mean, I came in at 8:16. So I don't know what happened before, but I'm just sharing something that happened in one part of my ward. The audit has already been done. So I don't know. I did not ask about what has happened to the books, whether they were discarded and what process they followed. So I'm not sure, but maybe I will inquire and find out. However, one thing that I did inquire was about the list of books that are being read by the students, because I had a member of the community calling me and asking what happens if the list of books contain, as we mentioned now, racist or other material that is not acceptable to certain communities. And I was told by the teacher that if the parent complains, my daughter's or my son is reading something which is inappropriate for us, our community, our culture, whatever reasons, the teacher said the student is allowed to read another book. So in every grade, I think grade 9, 10, 11, 12, they have maybe about 12 to 15 books. And so they are provided an alternate choice. The second thing is when we talk about, are these books being read by the teacher? So if there's 12 in grade 9, so the grade 9 English teachers need to read these books the approved books and be aware of what is the content of these books. And I think they are doing it. The other thing regarding the moldy and old books, I know, what we could do is when you prepare the list, maybe take the help of the custodian, but take a big bag, tie up the moldy books and ask him which is a safe place to keep it. Because, if you don't want to destroy it, we'll have to find a place to get rid of it at the end of like the whole process that you have now laid out. So we need a timeline for this. If we pass a resolution or the motion, how long is it going to take? Because we're almost at the end of the academic year. And so we need to be aware of the fact that we are going into the next academic year. How long do you want this to go on? Thank you.
So Trustee Benjamin, just for clarity, this discussion's not about what's happening in the curriculum or in classrooms, but it's the library offerings. So I don't know if that's helpful, but I believe that Superintendent Smith had a response.
Actually, not a response, a question. Yes, and thinking about the request that's coming forward, that's being put on the table, if we need to move then through the KISS 5 process, which is already what Superintendent Hoppy has described for every book in order to create this matrix, then are we closing library learning commons to enable staff, who are many of them part-time, to complete this and to ensure that students then are not accessing books that are currently in collections that can cause harm?
Great.
Through you, Chair Net. No, just if staff are I'm getting mixed messaging. Either staff are only doing the weeding process now for old books, or they're in stage 2 and they're removing harmful books. But in whichever scenario, staff can continue to remove those books off the shelves and put them elsewhere. Put them in a bag. Let's put this off temporarily. I think we're all on the same page that this is so important that we want to create this, catalog or record matrix or metric as soon as we can. So no, I don't think we should close the library. I think, staff are pulling books off shelves, pull them off the shelves, but don't throw them in the dumpster until we can write down what we're throwing out. I think we have a fiduciary responsibility defined in the Education Act of Ontario to manage our funds to the best of our ability. And in conversations with my colleagues and in visiting schools, we've all seen schools, as mentioned by Trustee Susan Benjamin, where the audit is now complete, unfortunately. So we need to pause this process until we can define a catalog, please. That is the motion.
Trustee Benjamin, oh, sorry, go ahead, Catherine.
Through you, Madam Chair, just as a clarity, doesn't work. Just as a clarity, are you saying pause the disposal or pause the process? Because that comment was very different than the comment you made earlier. Are you pausing the process or the disposal?
Thank you, Councilor Lockyer. I appreciate that. To pause the process, pause the disposal. So you're absolutely right. Let's just pause the disposal. The process can continue, but I don't want to, my motion is to pause all disposal and destruction of books, with the exception, as Trustee McDonald pointed out earlier, of books that have biohazards, like mold. But all of the other books that fall within the musty guideline, that those not be destroyed until we can catalog them.
Sorry, Trustee Benjamin, did you have any further follow-up?
No, sorry, I didn't know. It's just when I went up. I don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Benjamin. I had Trustee Bailey next, and then I have Trustee K. McDonald.
Through you, Chair. Let me just be clear, I'm not a member of this committee, so I have no voting rights on it. So I'm going to say that. But I do have a question. I noticed that throughout this presentation, June 2023 kept on coming up. This is the day to do this by. Is there a reason that date is so important that this cannot be pushed off?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. This is a date that we have in our timeline that was in a board report as part of the critical path for the work to respond to Ministry Directive 18.
If it was in a board report, thank you for that. But was it a report while we were in supervision?
While we were in supervision? Yes, while we're in supervision and afterwards.
Okay, so thank you for that. My other question is, no, I think I want to clarify.
Sure.
In what Trustee Alves is asking. Because we do have a responsibility to our taxpayers for destroying books, removing books. Again, I have a problem with reading and removing books. So what you've said so far is we're in the first phase. What you're asking for, Trustee Alves, is a system to be created to track. Hold on, let me finish before you jump in. A system to be able to track the books that are being removed currently during phase 1, which will then be used in phase 2. Yeah.
Through your chair. It could be as simple as like, I guess.
Just a system, yes.
Quite literally, just something as simple as an Excel graph where the person responsible or people's responsible for removing the books could say, today we removed 10 books, and they could list the titles. It would be something that would exist in the weeding process and go all the way down to steps 2 and 3 of the audit. I think it's important because there's been so much miscommunication, and we've been asking these questions for 5 months, that this way it'll be abundantly clear, and we can pause until we have a record of what's being thrown out.
So then my other question is, who would have access to this list?
Through your chair, I suppose each school would. Superintendent Hoppy made a good point that this would be individual to each school. So the administrators responsible for throwing the books out, the administrators that are responsible for reading the books in which they're throwing out would just simply write the title down, and that's it.
But who would have access to the list? If parents or community members had concerns about the number of books that were removed, would they be able to have access to it?
Through you, Chair, I certainly hope so. Yes, I would hope that eventually we could have this as public record. Yes, absolutely. Parents should know they're the taxpayer and we are ultimately liable to them. We have fiduciary responsibility.
I did previously have Trustee Cole and Trustee Davies, who had been on the list before Kay McDonald put her hand back up. I don't see Trustee Cole here anymore. Trustee Davies, do you have a question or?
Oh, just, I'm not on the committee. I can't vote. Just my initial thoughts are on it. If a librarian sees a book that's moldy and going to be a health hazard to a kid, I want her to take it off the shelf and get rid of it as quickly as possible. There should be no discussion about that. Yes, we seem to be in different phases all over the place. I haven't been in the schools. I, as a practice, don't do that. Seems to be a lot of operational stuff going on there that I shouldn't be involved in, and I'm very conscious of that. But again, I would just sort of lean on staff's doing the best they can, and I do believe that there should be a list that should be shared among schools, so that, again, my main concern is a book's being thrown out in Caledon and it's being ordered in South Mississauga. And there's got to be a way to stop that. Thanks, that's all I got.
Thank you, Trustee Davies. Trustee Kay McDonald?
Thank you. I have 3 more questions of clarification on the motion to trying to understand what you're doing. Because you said we have a fiduciary responsibility. However, regardless of how much my thinking is, based on the motion, right? You're saying you're thinking at the financial part of it. But in my thinking, correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't matter what it costs. If books are moldy, if it could be $3 million, if we have $3 million worth of moldy books, we throw them out. If they have $3 million worth of hate, we have to throw it out. So I don't I don't understand how this motion is going to hold us accountable for finances, where the fact of the matter is we have books that should not be in our libraries. So that's the first thing I'm going to ask you to clear up for me, please. And you talk about that it's like some are at different phases, some at stage 1, some at stage 2, but schools are entities on their own. And I can't remember who mentioned that. Somebody said, like, you have librarians that have been literally weeding from day 1 since they got the job as a teacher librarian. So they probably don't have, 2,000 books to dump, but you might have a librarian who has never culled a book since 2006, and they have 4,000 books that need to be culled or disposed of or recycled if they could be. So that to me would account for people at different stages, because people are at different. The school is not a homogeneous entity. They have different people with different practices. And also, by your motion, are you now telling us to abandon the ministry directive? Because I also have concerns about that. Because are we now telling the minister that, okay, we have the board back and we are going to pause a process that you directed us to do? I'm not sure how that's going to go over to the ministry. So if you could answer those 3 questions.
Through you, Chair. Trustee McDonald, obviously not. Bluntly, no, absolutely not do I want to reverse the directive. And to be abundantly clear, I made an amendment to the motion following your first set of feedback. If a book is moldy, throw it in the garbage. If a book falls under the musty acronym, to simply remove the book as you would. We're not in stage 2 yet, so that's apparent that shouldn't be happening yet, but in some schools it has. But we just wait until we can kind of write down the title, remove it off the shelf, don't lend it out, and just wait until staff have created a system where we can write down what we're throwing out. And the answer to that is both financial, but also equitable. As Trustee Will Davies mentioned, I want to make sure that if there's a racist book up in Caledon, people in Mississauga Lakeshore know, hey, this book is racist, we probably shouldn't buy it. I don't see why that's necessarily a bad thing. I hope that this was just a miscommunication, but to be abundantly clear, the reading is great. The audit is fantastic. I just think we should be cataloging it. And again, to be abundantly clear, the amendment to the motion is, if there's a moldy book, throw it out. If it falls under any other category other than, physical damage, let's wait and report it. And this will give the board a better understanding of how many books were damaged and just sitting on shelves, and how many books were other.
Yeah, but what I'm having difficulty understanding is, why does it have to be paused? If a book is hateful, then you just put it, okay, this book is hateful. So I could understand the motion saying, let's catalog every book that's deemed hateful, for example. We don't have to catalog every book that's moldy, because moldy book is moldy. You throw it out. You can say, okay, I threw out this book because it's moldy. And I'm just thinking of man hours. Like I don't, this motion, I find like I cannot support it when it goes on the floor, because I don't, yeah.
Thank you, Trustee McDonald. I'm not sure there's much more I can do to clarify. If you don't want to support it, I don't suppose you have to. I motion the chair to commence with our recorded vote.
Are there any other further questions on the motion on the floor from Trustee Elves? Okay.
I just want to make it clear, right? Sorry, through you, Chair, may I speak?
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
sorry, yes, go
Sorry.
ahead.
So when we put a motion here and if it gets approved, it doesn't happen. It has to go to the board table where all 12 trustees who, get to vote. So it's only a start of a process. Also, a motion can be amended, can be changed, and can be done. So I just wanted to bring that point up as an understanding of the process. Anyway, thank you, Chair, for that.
Could I, hold on one second, let me take a look at my wording. Could I suggest that someone may want to pass an amended version of this motion, that we pause until a guideline is provided to schools for transparent documentation of reasons to remove and until more sustainable paths for disposal are researched.
Yep. Accepted.
And would there be any questions or thoughts on that? Oh, Trustee K. McDonald?
Yes, so I was actually going to speak to a comment Brad made, depending on how the vote went, to see if I needed to make the comment. But I just wanted to be clear. So let's say, for example, the motion passes tonight. If it doesn't pass, well, nothing happens. But if it passes, the staff technically can still continue the process because it has not been approved by the board. It has to come to board before the staff halts the process.
Correct.
Correct.
Yes, that's good clarification. Thank you, Trustee McDonald. Okay, are there any further questions? Oh, Catherine?
Yes, I just want to clarify. So Trustee Alves, you have removed your motion. You have removed your motion and replaced it with the proposed wording of
That's
Trustee
correct.
Promoli?
Yeah, Trustee Promoli summarized it well. So I removed my original motion and accepted the amended version.
So, perhaps we could read it one more time. It's quite different.
Yes, yeah, so
I'll read that out now, Trustee Alves.
okay. So, hold on, I can't move anything because I'm chairing, so, yes, here we go. There we go, perfect. Good luck with the handwriting, I apologize.
Can I just ask a question, please? Can you read the whole, motion? Because I think I may have missed it at the beginning. So I'd like to see what the end product is.
Yes, okay, Lucas can't read my handwriting, I'm so sorry. So I'm going to read it for him. The motion is that we pause until a guideline is provided to schools for transparent documentation of reasons to remove and until more sustainable paths for disposal of books are researched.
Okay,
and are
thank
there
you.
any questions or thoughts on that?
No, thank you.
Trustee McDonald?
Could you read it again, please?
Yeah. The motion is that we pause until a guideline is provided to schools for transparent documentation of reasons to remove books and until more sustainable paths for disposal are researched.
So, but in the presentation, they said that schools have a guideline. So you're saying?
Yes, sorry, Trustee McDonald, so a guideline for documenting the reasons the books are being removed. So there is some documentation of books that are being taken off the shelves right now, we understand. This is essentially it's in addition to the record that's being kept, just saying which of the criteria under must-be it's being removed for. So if it's being removed because it's moldy, if it's being removed for a cause aside from that, it would, instead of just being a list of books, it would be the book along with the reason that it's being removed. And I'd like to know from Superintendent Smith, does this make sense? Is this clear? Okay. And did you have any questions about it? Am I allowed to put that back to Superintendent Smith? I'm so sorry. Okay. No, but.
Yeah, so we just want clarification that it's pause on disposal, not pause on the weeding process step one.
I think that the pause would be, I think the process would be able to continue provided that there's even a spreadsheet in place just saying this is why we're taking Jola's bikes off of the shelf, or I have no better reasoning.
Yeah, according to the must-be guidelines.
Yeah.
The pause is specifically for the disposal. The weeding can continue, and then we'll review.
But understanding that books that are moldy, of course, just need to go, and that this process does need to continue in some sense because there is a time frame there that we understand that this is, we're coming towards the end of the school year, so there's a lot of work to do there. But making sure that we are doing what we can for these books to be disposed of in a more sustainable way, and that's clearly delivered to staff. Were there any further questions or clarification, Catherine?
Thank you through you, Madam Chair. Pause disposal until guidance provided to schools for transparent documentation of reasons per title.
With the exception of moldy books. Moldy books are.
No, we still document it. Still document it.
But wait, if you find a moldy book in the interim, throw it out.
Right, but trustee, I don't think that that's something that takes any additional, I mean, this seems like a fairly simple addition to what's already being done.
Exactly.
So my feeling is that this may not actually cause much of a pause at all. I could be wrong on that. But it's a shift in the way that we are moving forward in terms of understanding which titles are being removed at which schools.
Yeah, at this point, this is just a motion to go to open session, and the motion is that we pause the disposal of books until we have a catalog created to identify which books are thrown out.
Except moldy.
In the interim, if a moldy book comes up and we don't have a catalog, that book should be thrown in the garbage. That's it.
I guess one question of clarification, just for Superintendent Smith. Do we currently note if we're removing a book because it's moldy? Does that ever get cataloged anywhere, or do we just toss it and that's the end of it?
And thank you, and through you, Chair, any book that is taken off a shelf is removed from the catalog. So we do work through that system, but this additional step, I take it back to the team.
Okay, any other further questions?
So can I speak to the motion?
Wait,
Uh,
I have a question.
Yes, I see coordinating principal Appleton.
Instructional coordinator, but yes.
Sorry.
I just want you to be clear what the process is that we're doing right now. Right now, we have a scanner that scans the ISBN or the book. So everything that we do is automated. So the list is generated through an automated process. So now we're asking 0.5 teacher librarians, which is what I had to teach another class, to manually write down each book. And until I have my 0.5 allocation time to do that, these books remain on the shelves. I'm just letting you know, although if the motion passed, this will take months to get done, because in elementary, most of us are not even 1.0. We are part-time teacher librarians. Before it was automated, we just made it manual. And like you said, there could be, because we're a ministry directed, a neutral third party has found enough harm in our collection that there will, sorry, I can't hear.
So sorry, I'm just hearing some notes at the table that is this appropriate? Like, should we be hearing this at this point, or is this?
Well, I'm just letting you know, we're going to be pausing the implementation of ministry directives substantially, right? It will take us like 4 or 5 months now.
Staff debate the policy. Staff's not supposed to debate a motion.
That's correct. You can ask me the question.
Okay. Thank you.
Making sure you realize what you're asking teacher librarians to do as part-time teacher librarians. We're not in there, and I have report cards to write. I have teaching to do. So now I'm going to be manually writing it down. Is that what we're asking?
A point of order, sorry, a question as a point of order for our legal governance coordinator. I don't think at this time it's appropriate for staff to debate the motion. Is that correct?
That is correct. If you provide, if you ask a question, staff may answer, but yes, if they're not asked a question, they're not part of the debate.
Thank you. At this time, I think it's appropriate for us to vote on the motion for it to go to open session for further debate. As mentioned by my colleague, trustee Brad McDonald, this isn't, at this point, we're not voting for the motion to be enacted. It's simply to go to the open session for debate amongst 12. So at this point, Chair, I would like to ask that the motion be put to vote.
No, point of order. It hasn't been put on the floor to debate. We're asking clarity for what your motion meant, because I would like to make my comment, and I will give, like I said before, I will not be supporting this motion because, one, I think we're getting into the weeds. I think I trust the professional judgment of teacher librarian to determine if a book is moldy. I don't need to know the name of every moldy book that exists in our board. I can't understand the value in having a catalog of all books that are moldy in our board. But when it's decommissioned, it's out of circulation. So that's good enough for me. I think, let's look at the time we're taking away. I just came from a meeting where, a parent was advocating about the lack of support for autistic kids. And I think it's a waste of financing and resources to take time away from a teacher librarian's duty to in the library and cataloging what books are moldy. I think Also, I think there are great implications of pausing the work of a ministry directive so shortly after we have come back from, we just got the board back, and it may not be pausing it permanently, but we have timelines. Like, you know, my understanding is when we had submitted plans to the ministry, we gave them timelines when things are going to be done. I don't know what effect this pausing is going to have on our timeline to achieve the promise that we gave to the ministry that, okay, this can be completed, or the reading of books we completed at this date. I don't see the financial benefit of doing what we're doing. And also, even if you say let the process continue in terms of storing. So if you have a facility that has hundreds of books that they need to dispose of, right? So let's say they have a book there from, 1990 that they deem irrelevant, right? I don't know if there's storage facilities in schools to have these bags. I don't know where all these books will be stored. And even storing those books, if they're not stored correctly, they also may become moldy. So again, we just add in mold and another issue to deal with. I really cannot see the value in the motion, so I will not be supporting it. All my points. Yeah.
Madam Chair, for some reason my hand raising is not, but when you have a chance, give me a chance to speak.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Trustee Green, I couldn't hear what you said there.
No, my hand raising, it seems like it's not working, but so when you have a chance and everybody else has spoken, I would like to speak.
Okay, go right ahead.
So I listened very carefully and attentively to what's been asked here. I cannot support anything that's going to direct staff, and staff, I don't see the value in what's been asked here of staff. And the direct staff, basically, we don't know how much it's going to cost. Invest time when we find money into what we're asking here. When we could invest whatever funds we have to support social work and mental health and stuff like that. This is of no values. And I think this motion is actually stepping out of line of our role and responsibility as governance caretaker of the board. And there's a lot that I could say tonight, but I'm going to pause at that and say I cannot support this motion, because not only that, we are still being observed by ministry and what we do, and to ask staff to stop a process permanently that is part of a ministry directive is just outright wrong. And we need to be careful as a board and the decision that we make. We need to understand we have a duty, a fiduciary duty, to ensure that the process that has been put in place, especially from ministry under the Education Act and so forth, and our own board policy, that we need to allow staff to carry out their duties and responsibility without interference. And I believe that this motion is crossing the line, so I can't support it.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Green. Trustee Alex would like to clarify.
Thank you, Trustee Green. And again, I really just want to be as clear as I possibly can. In no way, shape, or form am I asking that the ministry directive be delayed in any way. Absolutely not. I think that our work in the equity space is of paramount importance. I'm simply suggesting that if a book is inherently racist or inappropriate in one part of the Peel District School Board, we should be aware of it in the other parts of the school board. There are books that, are uncomfortable for students to read in Caledon. And I think that students in Mississauga Lakeshore should be aware of those books, as Trustee Will Davies mentioned, and Trustee Carly Bailey mentioned earlier in the discussion as well. And as it stands, there's nothing to prevent an inappropriate book from being found in Caledon from being reordered in Mississauga Lakeshore. So I hope that clarification is enough. And again, by no means am I suggesting in any way, shape, or form that we stop or delay the directive. simply that we stopped throwing them out until we could write them down so we could avoid an inequity. But that's it.
Respond to that, Madam Chair. The very fact that we're directing staff, this is a lot of investment to write down book one and one. We are crossing the line here, and we have to understand our role and responsibility where the buck stop, as far as I'm concerned. And not only that, for us to direct staff to do something like this, we would need to ask staff to bring back a report to tell us how much time it would take staff to do that and the cost that is attached to it before we could direct staff in any way like this. So for these reasons, I still cannot support this here at this committee level. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Green. Trustee Ellis?
So this will be my last point of clarification. In one of our directives, accountability and transparency, that was Minister Lecce's directive to the Peel District School Board. And I just think that this motion would help contribute to that. And regarding the cost of writing names down, by no way, shape, or form am I suggesting that staff sits there with a pen and pencil. I believe the administration mentioned earlier that they scan books and that teachers have to read the books to identify if they're problematic. I'm simply suggesting that when that book is scanned, that title be noted. That's all. And I don't have any additional clarification. Apologies if there's been any miscommunication, but that's as clear as it could have been.
Okay, so I suppose this is the time we put the motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder for this motion?
It was originally seconded by Stan.
It was originally seconded by Stan. Okay, so I guess, okay, so now, oh, Catherine?
It actually is a new motion by this point because Trustee Ellis did remove and replace with yours, so you do need a seconder.
Okay.
I will second the new one.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Cameron. Okay, all in favor?
So it's recorded, so it's recorded, reporter will go through the names.
Oh, yes, okay.
So they need to raise their hands
Online as well?
Oh, yes, some of them don't work. Okay, so do we list everyone off in order then? Because there are five of us who are present.
So Trustee Promodi, in favor?
Yes.
Trustee Alves in favor?
Yes, in favor.
Trustee Cameron in favor?
In favor.
Trustee Benjamin?
I do not support this motion because I trust on the professional judgment of our staff. And I think work is already being done. And I totally agree with what Chair Green said. We are entering into areas that we should not be entering. For these reasons, I will not support this motion.
Trustee McDonald?
For reasons previously stated, I will not be supporting this motion.
I think Trustee Clark is on too, right?
Trustee, he's not.
Yeah.
And Trustee Green?
Not in favor.
And Trustee Cole?
She's no longer present.
She's no longer.
I think her computer ran out. She ran out of power on her computer.
Are we able to call her in?
And
Three in favor, three against.
So what happened?
Fail. Okay, thank you to everyone for this very interesting discussion tonight. And thank you to staff who've been here tonight and given us a lot of your time. We really appreciate it. And we've learned a lot tonight. So, okay. All right, so now we are going to move on to item 7.2. Where is my agenda? Okay, 7.2, the implementation of learning recovery tutoring programs in PDSE. And I will send it over to Superintendent Hoppy.
Thank you and good evening, everyone, and through you, Chair. In spring 2022, the Ministry of Education allocated approximately $13 million to the Peel District School Board in order to provide tutoring to Peel students following 2 years of learning disruptions due to COVID-19. The purpose of this funding is to permit the board to offer tutoring support programs that will support learning recovery and renewal in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. For the purpose of this funding, tutoring support programs include hiring or assigning staff to work with students in small groups to support them with their learning needs during the school day, outside of school hours, for example, before and after school, on weekends, and partnering with third-party providers or community organizations who can provide tutoring support to identified students. The tutoring support program in Peel is called the Learning Recovery Tutoring Program. Funds were allocated by the government in two main phases. Phase 1 was from April to August 2022, and Phase 2 was from September to December 2022. In December 2022 and again in March 2023, the ministry extended funding timelines so that all funds could be maximized. The phases and extensions to funding timelines are outlined in the report as Phase 1, April to August 2022, Phase 2, September to December 2022, Phase 3, January to March 23, and Phase 4, April to July 2023. In order to provide a comprehensive, robust program that would maximize opportunities for students, the board developed many diverse opportunities and partnerships in alignment with funding criteria. And I would like now to invite Elizabeth England, the coordinating principal of curriculum instructional and community partnerships in the curriculum instruction and assessment department, to continue to offer information as she was responsible for the implementation and success of many of these programs.
Thank you, Superintendent Hoppy, and through you, Chair. In Phase 1, funding was allocated to support Peel academic programs already in place, to best use existing infrastructure and board tutoring programs already running, such as Counting on You and Ontario Focused Intervention Program. School programs were run where staff was available and able to run programs. Community partnerships were developed by leadership and capacity building with Toronto Metropolitan University to support students in targeted areas of Bramalea with a high social vulnerability index. Third-party vendors were introduced at this phase, Phase 1 as well, and vendors were established through the board procurement process. This was in alignment with the ministry criteria of the spending guidelines. School summer programs and community partnerships were established with Patches 360, Indus Community Services, and Indigenous community members to support historically and presently underserved communities. Last, to ensure equitable access to tutoring support, the Peel Virtual Tutoring Center, PVT, was established. This call-in center employs a diverse group of educators supporting all subject areas in grades 3 through 12. Using a video conferencing platform, students book appointments up to 2 days in advance, including live hours, and meet one-on-one with a tutor. In summary, the following programs ran during Phase 1. Descriptions of the programs can be found on page 13 at the beginning of the appendices section of the report, which was shared with you. These programs are COI, which is Counting on You, extension, secondary school projects, OFIP, which is Ontario Focused Intervention Programs, an extension of those programs, Toronto Metropolitan University Study Buddy Program and Peel District School Board Badging Programs, third-party tutoring, summer programs, including community partnerships with Patches 360, Indus Community Services, and Indigenous Programming, as well as Peel virtual tutoring. In Phase 2, many of the same programs continued from Phase 1, with a focus on offering opportunities to schools to run school-based learning and tutoring programs. PDSB staff, as well as community organizations. Additionally, financial support was provided to Majuting Wishkushkang Indigenous Center tutoring programs, March break camps, Agents for Social Change, and partnership with Learn Style corrective reading programs for students with special education needs. The diversity of programs sought to provide as many avenues for student support for tutoring as possible. Parent-guardian feedback of the programs was resoundingly positive, with students benefiting from the opportunities to bolster their learning through tutoring support. This ends our presentation, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions from trustees? Trustee Davies?
Thank you for this report. I might have missed it, but do we have where there's some numbers on how much of a tutor's time was being utilized? Like, did we have, like I said, I know the expenditures are just salaries and stuff like that, but how much of their time was actually spent with students or just waiting for a student?
Through you, Chair. Thank you for your question. It really does depend on the program used. We can get you information specific to the program because there's such a variability in programs. It did vary from school to school and from program to program. More intensive support was provided in terms of hours per week and the third-party tutoring. And then in other programs, such as Peel Virtual Tutoring, students came on a drop-in basis. And so some students may have received 1 hour of tutoring a week. Some may have just dropped in for 1 hour once because they were having difficulty with a specific area. So we can find information for you based on tutors in general and hours in the program, especially Peel District School Board hired tutors. What would be more challenging to do would be to find which students they worked with and how many hours each student received with a particular tutor.
Thanks for that. No, I just wanted a more general idea. Was it like, okay, so this tutor was scheduled from 11 till 7. Nothing really happened. They just sat there and waited and nothing happened. I just want to make sure that our money is being spent wisely. I mean, I've heard a lot about the third party tutoring and all that wonderful stuff. But again, we've paid this money out, but do we have any sort of tracking on, yes, this number of hours was spent with students as opposed to, hey, we just spent salaries this number of hours, that's all.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. We do have that information from third-party vendors, and we were charged not for an hour a tutor spent, but we were charged for the actual time they were tutoring specifically Peel students. If they did not use those funds, they were then returned to the board.
Thank you very much for that.
Trustee Bailey?
Through you, Chair. When it comes to third-party tutoring, there was a lot of things in the media about that. Just for clarification, did Peel District School Board use any American companies for tutoring, or were they all Canadian-based companies?
Through you, Chair. So in order to become a tutor, it was open to anybody who would be able to meet the criteria. The criteria meant that they needed to be able to demonstrate that they could support our students with the Ontario curriculum. And so that would be any tutor. There were some that tried to apply outside of Ontario, but many did not meet that criteria because they were not familiar with the Ontario curriculum. However, if there was a vendor that did speak to the Ontario curriculum and they had expertise in other jurisdictions as well, and they met our criteria, then we did not prevent them from being able to engage in the process because they met the needs of our students.
So sorry, just for clarification, were there American companies?
I cannot recall offhand if there were American companies, but I can recall the criteria that I just recalled in terms of what they would need to meet in order to meet the needs of our students.
Okay, so in other words, it doesn't matter where in the world that the company is, as long as they can meet the needs for our students.
That is correct, yes.
And you don't keep any database at all or records of?
We do have a list of all the criteria, and it was made available. It was on the public website in terms of those third-party tutors and where they were based, because families were able to access them. So that information was public information in terms of all of the over 50 third-party tutors that families had access to. That was publicly available information.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Bailey. Any other questions from trustees? I've got a quick question. Do we know what percentage of tutoring spaces were in person versus online?
Through you, Chair, I do not have that information specifically, but that is information that we would be able to provide you, yes.
Thank you. Yeah, just because we do know that many students did struggle with virtual learning during the pandemic. So I'm curious to know if we were able to provide some of this catch-up work in person to help the students in particular who did have that challenge.
So through you, Chair, yes, we absolutely were. And one of the most powerful pieces of the supports that we offered was that we had a system that allowed students to choose the best way that they wanted to receive support. So even though there were many who did not enjoy the online experience, there were many that did enjoy the online experience. And so the online tutoring was the best support for them. Conversely, there were those who wanted and only thrived in an in-person situation, and we offered those supports for them as well.
That's great, thank you. Can I ask, is there any way that we'll be tracking or measuring the success of the programming, just for future knowledge?
So it depends, through you, Chair, in terms of clarification, we do have metrics that we were keeping as far as the number of students that were engaged, and we did have to report our usage to the ministry. So you would need to be more specific in terms of what you are looking for in terms of the determination of success. As an example, if you were talking about the number of students who were able to access the tutoring, that had the monies not been provided, that would not have been able to. That is available in the report already because we're able to see the different forms in which the students were able to engage. But if you were looking for a particular metric that might not have been there, that's something that we might not be able to. So it really depends on what you're looking for in terms of your definition of success.
Oh, that's great, thank you. If we were to, looking ahead, are there lessons that we learned from this that we would be able to take as we're moving forward to help continue students who do continue to struggle?
Thank you for the question, and through you, Chair. There's lots of wonderful lessons that we were able to take from this. In terms of what we are going to be able to do moving ahead, the monies, just to be clear, the ministry is not continuing the funds. So this year, at the end of June, is when the monies are to be utilized and everything will be exhausted as far as what's been allocated to us. But we have made commitments in terms of wanting to move forward in areas where we have the resources available to continue to build on the structures and the supports, because it brought awareness to our families and to our students that these supports existed. As Coordinating Principal England already referenced, we built on existing infrastructure in order to expedite and to be able to make the most effective use of our existing structures and to reach as many students as possible. So after this period, we look to continue to utilize those same structures, and we will have, our hope is that we will have greater take-up in supporting students through those structures because there's now greater awareness that was able to be brought to.
Great, thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Superintendent. I have just realized that I neglected to put this report on the floor, so my full apologies. Trustee Ellis, would you be able to? Okay, and Trustee Benjamin, could you second?
Yes,
I think that's a yes. Thank you.
Yes.
And Trustee Benjamin, did you have a question also?
Yeah, it's not a question actually. I had this discussion with Superintendent Hoppy, and you know what? I was impressed by the work done by our the principal who was running this program, and you know, it has benefited our students in you know, in so many different ways. And considering the fact that our students have been logging behind in so many different ways, I hope we can convince somebody in the ministry to at least, you know, what do you call it, support this program for another year, because it's going to benefit a great deal of our students from grade 1 upwards. So yes, this is what I had to just add. It was a great program.
Thank you so much, Trustee Benjamin. Any further questions from trustees?
No, thank you.
Okay, the report is here for receipt. It has been moved and seconded. All in favor? Okay, carried. Okay, moving on. Item number 8, trustee motions for, first of all, thank you so much, Superintendent. Item number 8, trustee motions for consideration. I don't believe that we have any, no, we don't have any. And then item number 9, trustee notices of motion. Do we have any notices of motion? No. Okay. Item number 10, I think we'll all be very hesitant to go to this one, but may I have a motion to adjourn?
Aye.
And Trustee Cameron second. Okay, thank you. And all in favor?
Carried. Okay.
Great job,
Thank you,
Chair.
everyone.